I am but a man, and men, well, we have hair in places we don't really want it. A lot of it, actually, in bunches and bushels from head to toe. The question is there anything that can be done? Of course there is. My friends at Manscaped are well equipped, and dare I say even eager, to assist you in becoming more shiny and shorn, and it all begins with their 4th generation performance package, of which I am a satisfied user. The center of the so-called Performance Package 4.0 is the lawnmower trimmer. Now, this thing can be used to keep the back of your neck straight or to trim your beard. I use it for both. But it's specially designed to keep that crotch and butt area in shape. I don't need to be more specific, do I? You and I both know you're fumbling down there with a razor, and you really, really shouldn't. God only knows what one nick of the blade may do to you. The lawnmower is safe, effective, battery-powered, and it even comes packing an onboard light, so that you don't lose anything in your bodily crevices. And it can be used on your chest, armpits, and more. It's great. Once you get your hands on it, you will truly understand. So give Manscaped a try. Get 20% off your order with free shipping by using the code SACRED at manscaped.com. That's SACRED at MANSCAPED.com. That's 20% off your order with free shipping by using the code SACRED at manscaped.com. Make your balls a priority this fall. Choose Manscaped. Your balls will thank you. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode number 165. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by Chris Raygun, coming in from a safe house in Kabul, Afghanistan. Chris, what's going on over there in that sterile looking room of yours? You're really leaving.
Yeah, I'm moving. I'm packing everything up. Everything's covered in bubble wrap and weird foam that I inexplicably have access to that I don't know what I would have used it before for, but yeah, it's all coming together. All this is obviously, you can't put a sofa in a box.
Right.
So,
well, you could, but you
everything's pretty much done except for my computer and my desk, which is like the PC setup, like the intricate, like wired. It's the most tedious thing. So immediately after this is done and after the files are uploaded, I'm unplugging all this and
you're unplugging and you're going. This is your maiden voyage on the show. Well, no. What's the end of the maiden voyage? The return voyage. What is there a name for that? I'm going to look this up. What is the opposite of a maiden voyage?
I never thought about this.
There's really nothing coming up. The opposite of a maiden voyage is first voyage. No, that's sent to the breakers. Okay.
That's terrible.
What's coming up here. Sent to the breakers.
That's not nearly as catchy as maiden voyage.
No. Well, good to see you as always. You have to take advantage. You have to at least film some sort of hostage video in that room before you go. If you're listening to the audio podcast, this looks like Serbia in 1994 in his room right now. It's great. Close the curtains. There's a bunch of shit going on outside. It's great. Well, Chris, good to see you. Dustin Furman, as always, our executive producer, co-host of Sacred Symbols. How's life?
Life is good. Nothing too different for me. Just like hanging out, working, playing games. I couldn't think of anything interesting to say at all, which is good. That's how I think it is once you get like later in life. If things are staying like pretty consistent, I'm always like good with that. As long as you're in a good spot.
I totally agree. I'm excited because we're doing the live show soon, but
yes,
I'm dreading it in a way too, because I don't like leaving my space. Like I was thinking about it. I have not been out of my space in quotes since like December of 2019, really. And because I lived with my mom for a few months when I was waiting for my house, but I still considered that like homey. Like it was not a foreign place to me. So this will be interesting. I haven't even left Virginia since I got here. So, and I used to travel as my old audience, or the older members of the audience, and I used to be all over the goddamn place. So it'll be nice and fun. I'm looking forward to that. That's gonna be a lot of fun. So we're doing that Labor Day weekend. I've gotten a few messages, Dustin. Have we talked about where the day after meet and greet, or not meet and greet, it's really just like get together, food trucks and all of this?
Yes.
What's going on with that?
So as of now, let's see, this is posting at noon on Friday on our Patreon. We are going to have a public post available at the time of this recording with all of those details enclosed. So you can go to our Patreon, whether you're a patron or free feed, which I guess we'll probably put out a tweet just to let the non-patrons know as well. We're going to have a big info dump there that Ben is working on. I mean, he's today is Thursday for us. He is getting that together now, and we're going to go over that later. So I recommend checking that out just so you can find the address and stuff like that.
Cool. Perfect. We're really looking forward to that. So obviously we'll have 200 and some odd people with us on Saturday. That's ticketed. But then the next day, that's for anyone that wants to come. We'll be there for a few hours. Food trucks, just kind of hang out. I don't know what I'm trying to kind of visualize this place. Is there like cover? Is it going to be sunny?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a large shelter. It's not like huge, but it is big enough that it will be. I mean, this is the thing about this meet and greet is that we have like the event. We know exactly how many people are going to be there. This meet and greet. I mean, we're prepared for anything, but we have the biggest shelter in the park. We're as prepared as we can be, but I don't know. Is it going to be 5,000 people and mayhem in Butler, the city of Butler? Who knows?
I doubt it. I think we'll have a few hundred. I think people, come hang out. I think I'll talk about this a little more. Let me think here. Next week, I guess, on next week's episode. Will that be in time? I don't know. Yeah, I guess so, because patrons will listen to it. But we're just gonna for people are curious, like, what's the mask situation? What's this situation? What's that situation? We're just gonna defer to like state and local guidelines. Right. No judgments if you want to wear a mask. We're not going to ask you for your vaccination status or anything like that. But try to respect everyone's boundaries. And the next day when we actually meet you, I'm happy to shake hands and stuff like that, take pictures or whatever, but let's try to keep a distance just to be safe, right? Like, no reason to tempt fate, even though we're outside and all of that. So all I'm saying is that there's a whole spectrum of people about how they feel about COVID and their vaccination status and masking or whatever. We respect pretty much that whole spectrum. In fact, we would have to respect the whole spectrum, another kind of spectrum, if we wanted to work with Dustin. And so we did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
So thank you for that. Obviously, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, early ad-free access to every episode of this show, access to 2 episodes of Sacred Symbols Plus a week. The most recent one actually was really fun. I sat down with Henry Maxwell, who's working on art now for Lilymo, but he's a longtime kind of indie artist, and he gave some insight into his voyage into and through the industry and how he found his way to us. The last couple of episodes, the other one with Punk Rock MBA, people have found these quite inspirational. Like, it's been really cool to read that feedback, so I appreciate that. By the time, actually, the next day after this goes live for patrons, Lord Cognito, of course, from Defining Duke, will be publishing. He's heading up, I think it's already done, actually, a Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade spoiler cast. So that will be the next episode of Sacred Symbols Plus, and so on and so forth. Remember, I haven't said this publicly yet, although we've discussed it on Plus. I'll be sitting down with Philip Mewson for an episode of Sacred Symbols Plus. I think his first interview ever about his plagiarism scandal. And I think the live show will be a Sacred Symbols Plus episode shortly after we record that, etc. and so on. You can buy merch at lastdaymedia.shop, etc. All right, let's get into a couple of corrections as we move into our show. Liam wrote into us and said, after last week's episode, I made a comment in the Discord regarding Colin's pronunciation of Caesar, the canceled PSVR game. So I called it SAR, CSAR, and we got a few pieces of input about this. I'm a helicopter pilot, and SAR and Caesar are part of our mission. I just wanted to share my perspective and say that while it would have been cool to see my helicopter in video game glory, my honest take is that I just don't think this game would be very fun and can completely understand why it never got off the ground. Ooh, little pun. Not only is this mission not as glamorous or flashy as people would think, I can't even begin to wrap my head around how complicated and disorienting it would be to fly with the Move controllers or a DualShock and a PSVR strapped to your face. Certain aspects of flying are even difficult to replicate in our intricate training simulators. So thank you, Liam, for writing in. This is a correction, of course, we discussed at length. So Manchester studio, the Sony first party studio that came and went without even leaving pre-production. We finally found out they were working on a PSVR helicopter rescue game. I called it Czar, but it's called Caesar. So I just wanted to let everyone know that. Doesn't matter because it's never going to see the light of day. Dustin.
I want to know if Liam has ever blasted sacred symbols through the speakers of the helicopter at any point. We always hear about these stories about people, whether they're, ambulance driver. We had the guy, after I mentioned Chili's, someone reached out to me and said he was a manager of Chili's and thought the shout out was cool. So hearing about all these people throughout, the world in their different circumstances, that's always fun. I love this thinking about the helicopter pilot, listening to sacred symbols. Very cool.
Yeah. In the helicopter,
hopefully.
Yeah, that would be nice. It is. Isn't it interesting we said this some weeks ago, like you said, but it's always interesting to think about how people listen to our shows and consume our shows. And by the way, I mean, it's funny you say that because last week we discussed a question about if the show is too long, and I have never, maybe rarely, maybe The Last of Us was the last thing that got people this upset in our community. But we had, I'm sure you saw it, but we had so much feedback of people being like, it was literally like 99% of people being like, whoa, like, don't make the show shorter. Yeah, and I'm like, well, we just want to open up a line of conversation. Everyone needs to calm down. If you don't, I'm going to send you to Chris's hostage room and he's going to record some sort of video, put it on Rumble.
Some kind of video.
Rumble? What's a Rumble?
Rumble's like a new YouTube kind of competitor.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's not Live Leak.
Not
right,
live.
right.
No,
So
well,
it's
it might go on Live Leak
YouTube.
if you don't pay the ransom. Then it'll be on Live Leak.
Oh shit.
This is getting pretty dark. All right. One more correction. This one's for you, Dustin. Mark Elfring wrote in and said, Hey, CDC, last episode you guys said that Katie Holmes ran Theranos, but it is actually Elizabeth Holmes that ran the company. Katie Holmes is an actress famous for Batman Begins, Dawson's Creek, and being married to Tom Cruise, babysitting my cousin, etc. Oh, she babysat your cousin. That's interesting.
Whoa.
She happens to be from my hometown of Toledo, Ohio, and I could not in good conscience allow a fellow Toledoan to be improperly attributed to this fraud. All the best and keep dusting those balls. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. I know we got a few corrections about that too.
Yeah.
I noticed that we were saying Katie Holmes, but in my mind, I'm like, well, that's got to be a very common name. So I just went with it. I'm like, well, there can't just be one Katie Holmes. There are many Colin Moriartys. You know? So certainly there are thousands of Katie Holmes. So I was like, oh, there's just two of them. Chris?
I heard you saying that, and I was like, I didn't know anything about this story, so I was like, oh, that's interesting. I had no idea Katie Holmes did that. And I just assumed that that's what the story was. So it was a lot less fascinating when I found out that it was just some random, person.
Right.
Yeah,
that was when I discovered that, like, after we recorded, at some point I was like, oh no, that wasn't the right name. It's like, man, it was such a good point. Don't you hate that? Like, I'm like, man, that was such a good reference, and then just that one little thing. It's okay though. I think everyone understood.
All right. Few things to get through. Actually, more than a few things to get through before we get to what we're playing. First of all, if you buy a PS5 now, they're not really becoming any more common, but if you do, you might actually get the one that we mentioned a couple months ago that is lighter, that has the new base screw and all of that. Those are appearing in the wild, so don't be surprised if you get that first revision in your box. Just before we started recording, a few people in our community linked us to this video. Braden Burge was one guy that did it. I don't know what the nature of this video is. I'm not even sure how to link people to it because it's got a ridiculous name. But if you go to this guy's YouTube channel called Christopher Turner, it's called Turner Made. He has a video. I mean, this is what the video is called. PXL 2021 10817. It's just a bunch of numbers. But what it seems to be is either a really well done fan made UE4 game, or it is some sort of leak of an early build of a Mandalorian game. A lot of people talking about this. The interesting thing that makes me feel like there's two things that make me feel like this could be real. The first thing is that it's just very complex. There's a lot of work that went into this, including like a Baby Yoda like model and all this other shit. Seems like a waste of time. The second thing that I think is even more substantial is that there is a Stadia overlay at the end of the video, meaning that this is running on Stadia. And it could be that they're building on Stadia and this guy has Stadia dev kit access. I have no idea, but I'm curious if you guys took a look at this video and if you did, what you thought of it. So Dustin, let's start with you. It's just a 4.5 minute video. It's pretty impressive. I mean, even if it's some sort of mod, it's not some fly by night shit. It's pretty well done. I mean, it's very empty. The sounds aren't right. A lot of people are skeptical about this, so I'm not saying it is real, but it's interesting. And I would believe that a Mandalorian game was being developed. What do you make of this?
I'm pretty conflicted on this one because I saw some people responding to your Twitter saying like, oh yeah, this is clearly this Unreal animation, which I get that, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that it's not real. Like there could be placeholder animations or other stuff just put in there. The most interesting aspect to me though is this the Stadia thing at the end. It's really brief, and if you pause it, it even says this person is playing Star Wars, The Mandalorian, blah blah blah. Which again, there's been some very very convincing fakes out there. Like someone with a moderate knowledge of Premiere Pro could fake that, but it's, I don't know, again, it's extensive. It looks cool. I'm not really sure what to think.
Yeah, I don't either. I think it looks cool too. I think what's interesting too is it's being shot from behind and overhead. You would think this would just be direct feed. If it was someone putting it. I mean, if you would really, and so there's two ways to look at it. You either want to think like, oh, this was stolen, found footage, so there's like a guy's head bobbing in the front of it and stuff. That somehow makes it more convincing. But at the same time, you would think it would be more convincing for it to just be direct feed. But maybe they wanted, if it is fake, to show like, look, it is running on Stadia. I mean, Chris, what do you think about this this brief 4.5 minute clip?
Yeah, it's weird because I know what people are saying. Where like it does look placeholdery. It does look like it could have been like thrown together with a bunch of like stolen. I mean, Star Wars. There's a lot of Star Wars assets available, like for download, like pretty much anywhere on the internet. Like, there's definitely. I know you're talking about the Baby Yoda model, but there's definitely been a pretty high fidelity Baby Yoda model used to mod into Skyrim for no good reason or whatever, you know.
Okay.
So that part, like, I understand, but at the same time, to me, the thing that gives it away is like something that's probably real is the radar at the top right that is like stunningly accurate, and that shit's like not super easy to do. I know because I've tried to do this. And like, granted, I'm not like a game dev or anything, so probably like smarter people will be able to figure that out more than, or you know, more effectively than I could with my friend in the UK in like 2013. But that would be difficult to fake, I feel. And it does look pretty substantial, like this jetpack and this flamethrower thing. And I could believe that this is very real. And the thing that actually like cements it to me as like more real than not is the Stadia thing. Not because it just says Stadia on it, but because I feel like that would be a weird thing to fake. I just don't know why you would fake Stadia. Like that doesn't, that's not good marketing, you know? Like that's not like, ooh, yeah, Stadia. No one's excited about that. That's not like something that you would include on purpose. So I do think this is like a really early build of something that's actually probably real. Like it seems legit to me. It seems early because there's definitely a lot of placeholder animations. You can tell it's like not quite right, but it seems like a lot of work. And that Baby Yoda looks, quite frankly, a little bit like a Dreams thing.
Oh yeah,
like the longer I look at it,
something you would wipe with the wand, make with your PlayStation wand.
But I think this is probably real. Like it would make sense to me that there's a Mandalorian game, because that's kind of the game that everybody wants anyway, you know? This type of like gadget driven Star Wars game that I kind of think we were almost going to get with 1313, but didn't, but you know, never got. So I'm leaning on real for this. I think like 75%, like I'm pretty confident this is real.
I'm kind of with you. I mean, maybe a little bit less certitude, but it just, people are like, oh, some people are like, looks like shit. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It looks like an early build of a game. I mean, that's what it looks like. Have you ever played early builds of games? This is what it looks like. The game doesn't run well. It's not optimized. Everything's off, right? Like but I agree with you. The HUD looks pretty good. There's actually a point that happens really quickly when he brings up what looks like a vertical radial for weapons as well. It just seems like there's a little bit more work in here than meets the eye. It brings me back to some of the old spoofs that tricked people back in the day that I think of, specifically the screenshot, as I brought up in the past, of Gears of War Redux, which was supposed to be like the PS3 version of Gears of War. Now, we later found out that Gears of War actually was being ported to PS3 and is running on PS3, which is never released. And so I look at that and I'm like, that was pretty convincing, but that was one of those things where they took a screenshot of it to make it look like it was real. And so that's why I was wondering what the nature of this footage is. But it seems like there's two people. I'm looking at it now. Seems like there's two people in front, and I've frozen the last shot, and there it clearly does. It says playing Star Wars The Mandalorian on Stadia. I just don't know if you can upload that kind of stuff. We don't put our games on Stadia. I have no idea how it works. So we would like to put our stuff on Stadia. I have no problem with that. But so we'll see. We'll keep an eye on it. Go look for it. Now that I tweeted it out, I'm sure a lot of people will find it and write stories about it and not credit us at all. All right. Another story. This one was written by Bloomberg, but I just wanted to point this out real quick. Nothing huge, but you might recall 38 Studios. You guys remember 38 Studios? Of course, this was the Rhode Island-based team that made Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning, and it was founded by Curt Schilling, who was a famous baseball pitcher. 38 was his number, hence the name of the studio. I knew people that worked there. Wonderful game. Came out. Electronic Arts published it in 2012, and then the company went bust because they invested all of their money into this MMO they were making called Copernicus that ended up melting down. And so they all got fucked. And the famous story about this that people might recall is that no one got their last paychecks. In fact,
the scuttlebutt is that they discovered that the jig was up. And I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but people at 38 discovered the jig was up when one of their wives went to get like an appointment with their OBGYN or whatever it was for their baby, and their insurance bounced. And so they called and they're like, what's going on? Then everyone realized that no one was getting their checks. Everyone's insurance was canceled and so on and so forth. And it was a complete disaster. I just wanted to let everyone know that apparently they've sorted this out to such a degree that everyone who worked there at the time will get between 14 and 20% of their final paycheck 9 years later. And it's funny because a lot of the paychecks are just all being mailed to the original address associated with each person. They didn't even go through the trouble of trying to find these people. So
that's so fucked.
So yeah, it's just an interesting little passing story you guys might want to go read about.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Sacred Symbols listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/symbols. So we're moving out of the summer and into the fall. And with that comes shorter days, colder weather, and perhaps even returning to a grind you've been dreading, like your kids heading back to school and all the chaos that comes along with that. It's easy to lose sight of yourself during this time of the year as things become a little more gray. But you shouldn't stay down, because keeping your mind healthy is a key to sustainable happiness and productivity. And it's here that my friends at BetterHelp come into play. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's this customizability that's at the heart of BetterHelp, and I personally know that this level of customization will help many more people seek the help they need. That's because I myself suffer from anxiety and depression, and I know I would have dealt with these issues a heck of a lot sooner than I did if I could just message with someone. I wholly endorse therapy for help in navigating relationships, overcoming issues at work, high stress or a bad temper or more, and I definitely endorse exploring the possibilities of dealing with what ails you at BetterHelp, because you don't have to drive to an office, sit in a waiting room, and see someone face to face. Indeed, once you sign up, you'll begin communicating with your therapist in 48 hours or less, so help is truly right around the corner. Please don't suffer in silence. Don't go without the help that you may need. Try BetterHelp and see what it can do for you. To get 10% off your first month of sessions, go to betterhelp.com/symbols. That's BetterHelp.com/SYMBOLS. And begin earnestly tackling your mental quandaries in the ways that make the most sense for you. That's what BetterHelp is all about, and help is waiting at betterhelp.com/symbols. Again, for therapy done your way, go to betterhelp.com/symbols.
Also, Gearbox opened a new studio in Quebec. It'll be a 250 person strong Canadian team. This isn't a huge deal, except for I thought it was interesting because now Embracer has 78 studios. EA recently announced that it's making its accessibility patents free for anyone to use them, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
The list of patents include contextually aware communication systems, systems and methods for automated image processing, and various luminosities and rendering and all of this. And this really helps disabled gamers play. And instead of making money on it, they've decided to make that free. So congratulations to them. And the last thing I wanted to discuss here before we get into some brief reader inquiries, John Burton. So John Burton is the founder of Traveler's Tales. This is the British studio that makes the Lego games. And they're called TT now. He hasn't been there since 2019, but he does this thing on YouTube called Coding Secrets. And he put this video up. It's called Did Sony Lie About SSD? PS3 could run PS5 Ratchet and Clank gameplay. Now, I thought this was pretty interesting because this is an expert programmer who founded TT Games and worked there for 30 years. And we had discussed in the past that I had thought that maybe Ratchet could be ported to PS4. We were talking about that as a hypothetical because we're seeing all of this, right? This cross-generational stuff. This guy claims that it could run on PS3. And he actually shows an example of a Lego game that is doing basically what this game claims to do with its rift jumping. And I'm just curious, Dustin, I don't know if you got a chance to watch this, but
Yeah.
it's only 6 minutes long. I highly recommend it. What did you think of this this contention?
I think that the truth is a little bit in the middle here, but I kind of think that this guy's kind of overblowing it, which I'm trying to think of, like, maybe he's right in that Sony marketing was saying like this type of gameplay is only possible on PS5, which then maybe it's like, yeah, he's got a point. Here's the thing that I think is interesting is that we're pulling this from the Video Game Chronicle article. The very last line of it says this claim was later dialed back somewhat after the game launched when game director Mike Daly told Axios, quote, "You can make a new game like the new Ratchet & Clank on the PS4, but just visually speaking, you'd have to dial it back a ton in order to get it run." I misread that. That's the game director, not the guy that made that video.
Right.
So
it's the first, and that's an article from July because I remember at that time that was the first acknowledgement from some Sony source saying, no, the game will run on PS4. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious because what the TT Games guy is saying is like, listen, these are all tricks. It was what I said. I mean, I'm a layman. I mean, I make games, but I write them. I don't, program them. I'm not in the engine regularly and stuff like that. But I could see too. I'm like, this isn't what they said it was going to be. And John Burton goes into why it was what I was saying. He said it a lot more eloquently, which is he was like, there's no choices, so it knows what you're going to do, right? Like that was the big thing. What do you think of this, Chris?
I mean, it's a very linear game, so obviously they can stretch it a lot further than you would be able to stretch something like Fallout or like Skyrim in that way, where there's fast travel and that has to be taken into account. And it's open world, and there's a lot of different choices and a lot of different trigger volumes that are activated at in various different orders. I do know what he's saying. You could probably get Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart running on a PS3 if it ended up looking visually worse than the PS2 Ratchet and Clanks. I could see that being possible. But I mean, at a certain point, what is the lie, Like, I don't believe that you could get Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart running on a PS3. Like, in the same capacity that it runs at, and with the same, even if you dialed back the visual fidelity and the frame rate down, like, there's only so much of that people are willing to accept before they're forced to admit, like, oh yeah, this isn't working. Like, you could get it running if it looked like if Ratchet looked like 8 squares.
Right.
But are you going to play that? Like, probably not.
Right.
So I don't know. I feel like this is kind of semantic, like it's all semantic. It's like, oh, well, you could, like, yeah, you could do a lot of things.
Yeah.
But would you settle for that?
Mm.
You probably wouldn't.
Mm.
Right. Well, and one other thing I just wanted to add, his point is that, like, a PS3, you can load something into RAM in the background, and then when you get there, it swaps over and you load into that. So when I was doing some research on this, because it's really interested me earlier today, is that in the Digital Foundry video where they interviewed the head of the technical aspects of the game, he said, we're loading entire levels. Our entire level is taking up all 16 gigs of the PS5's RAM, and then it swaps them out with the SSD. So theoretically, you could do this on PS4, but let's say you're running 2 levels and you've got 8 gigabytes of SSD and you need to load both of them. Then you're down to 4 gigabytes on each level, whereas opposed to on PS5, you have the entire 16. So we're talking a magnitude less. That's not even considering like the OS running on RAM or any kind of engine level stuff. Like, so it's like Chris said, it theoretically could be done. And that's why I think he has a point that, sure, maybe the Sony marketing was a little extreme, but again, it's like, what would it really look like at the end of the day, having this running on PS4 or PS3 for his argument's sake?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And what would the play experience be? I mean, like, I remember when we were talking about Ratchet and Clank when it was out and it was like kind of fresh. And I remember being like, yeah, like the Rift stuff is cool, but it's not that in and of itself isn't even exactly a new thing. Like, we saw similar things in video games for a while. Like, I mean, Titanfall 2 had that like standout level,
right,
where you're just shifting back and forth, and it's like, it's really cool. So that type of stuff is possible. It's just a matter of like the way that they're doing it. And I think that's what they're talking about really when they say that this is only possible on PlayStation 5. It's not about what's happening. It's about how and the amount of power that's needed to do it in that way. Whether or not that matters to the player at the end of the day, if like what they're getting is ostensibly the same from their perspective, like, that's a conversation. but I don't think there's any doubt that it's impressive that Ratchet and Clank is able to do what it does in the way that it's doing it.
Right. And
because
to the scale.
There's no way a PS4 could do it.
Yeah.
In that way.
I just thought it was interesting simply from the perspective of, well, kind of to tie it to earlier conversations we had around when Ratchet came out, but I guess it kind of just fed this own narrative I had in my mind that this is not all it's cracked up to be, certainly. Like, because a lot of people have called out like that when we saw in the trailer, like Ratchet going from rift to rift, like that's not a choice, right? I think that's what his video is saying. He's like, it's not like you're now you have 5 rifts and you get to choose one of them and it instantaneously loads. It knows exactly what you're doing. So
it's a linear sequence.
Right. So from that perspective, I just thought it was interesting, and it did kind of confirm at least somewhat what I was saying to me, which was that this is really cool. I think 2016 Ratchet's a better game. I've said that, but it was a very cute, very charming game. But I don't think it was like all it was cracked up to be, personally.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Andres wrote in with this interesting point that has been making the rounds. Chris, I want to know what you think of this first. He says, hey, Sigma males, do you think there's any credence to the idea that new Call of Duty games install sizes are intentionally left to be large? You guys always mention that we have so many games competing for our time. What better way to limit a player's options than by having an install size so large it forces them to uninstall the competition? This has been making the rounds a lot. I've heard this rumor before, but it seems to be percolating again. And I actually do not hate the theory, although I don't think it's necessarily true, but it's what we say. Like, games are becoming smaller. I've used specific examples of PS4, PS5 cross-gen games where they're smaller on PS5 than they are on PS4, the package files. When you download them on PS4 and PS5, you can see it for yourself. Call of Duty games are getting more and more bloated. And I've said, and I was wrong, that I'm like, I assume Call of Duty is just going to become much smaller. I thought that they would start releasing patches, in fact, that would start making the actual file smaller, even though it is a new patch. That's never come to be, and now these things are taking up hundreds of gigs on people's machines. Do you think it's intentional, or do you think that it's just the way it is?
I don't think it's intentional. Like, I like the theory. It's like a fun kind of like conspiracy because it does make sense in like a weird, like obtuse way. It's like, yeah, we're gonna make people uninstall Destiny and like all these and all these other games. But Call of Duty is so big that I don't think they have to think about that. You know, I don't think that they think about things in that way. I think they think that they're the top dog because they are, and they probably don't have to really. I don't think they feel like they have to conspire. I think because I remember this was a problem originally with the original Titanfall as well, and I know that that's obviously, you know, Respawn and you know, but those are ex Call of Duty people. So I wonder if like maybe just that kind of just that way of doing things, that way of like uncompressing files or like not compressing files in the first place, you know, and just uploading the package as is just kind of like a tradition that just exists within the company that just hasn't been rectified. That seems more likely to me than they're conspiring to steal space when they don't have to, because they're Call of Duty and they sell millions even when they suck. I don't know. I don't buy it, although it is fun to think of Sledgehammer or Infinity Ward as like just like doing these like weird shady like, ooh, we're gonna take up 400 gigs this time.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a deterrent for a lot of people. Actually, I feel like it hurts them more than it helps.
Well, Dustin, that seems like that's
what I was going to say.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a double-edged sword if this is the theory or if this is the conspiracy, because there's been many times where I've been invited to come back and either play Warzone or Cold War or something. I'm like, sorry, I need half a day to install that before I can do that again and play, just because I can't justify keeping something like that on my console that I'm just going to hop into once every other month. And so maybe if it was smaller, I would hop back in every once in a while, and maybe that would make me get interested, and who knows? But the barrier, at least for me, is too high to keep that on all the time. The second thing, just real quick, what I was thinking is that we're talking about the overall size. I wonder if it has something to do with the ability to update the game quickly, because these games get compressed down. There are shared assets between campaign and multiplayer or whatever, but I know that patching is not as simple as it might seem to the layman like us. So I don't know. It is interesting how it's not gotten any smaller, which I wonder if it's a remnant, since this Call of Duty game is still coming to last gen with PS4 and Xbox. But I don't know. We'll have to see when we get the first truly PS5 Series X only Call of Duty, if that has something to do with it. But
yeah,
I really don't know.
That's a good point, because you would assume even if with the SSD, even if an asset was shared, it shouldn't matter now. So,
Right.
Which would make the file smaller. So I think you might be right about the cross-generational stuff too. I think I don't think it's true per se, but I think at very best, you could say probably is something along the lines of like, well, why would we make it smaller when it's going to allow you to delete it more easily and all of that? There's just no impetus for us to do it. Although you hear a lot of complaints, but I guess they're seeing it as not prohibitive necessarily. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Elliot at Liberated Sun wrote in and said, question for Dustin and Chris. What would it require for you to start trophy hunting to the severity that Colin did? Dustin, let's start with you. What would it require for you to start trophy hunting with what he calls the severity?
Well, I think Elliot, what you need to understand is that I once, maybe not never to Colin's severity, but I was once a trophy hunter, and I left that life behind. And it was after too many bad trophy hunts where at the end, when that trophy pops, I didn't feel satisfied anymore. I felt frustrated and kind of annoyed. And eventually I just decided I can't do this anymore. I'd rather play more games. And that's, it's a stylistic choice, like between how Colin and I play games. Colin talks about how diving into a few smaller or a few games and going in deep, where I will complete a lot of the games that I check out, but I probably check out a lot more games than Colin does. And that's just a choice on how we want to play.
Indeed. How about you, Chris? What, you want to get back in?
You would have to go back in time and stop me from ever playing Cloning Clyde. And then maybe I would still be collecting trophies and achievements to this day. But that game ruined it for me, because on the 360 specifically, like the way they do achievements is a little bit different than trophies. They have gamer score specifically. So you get like 5 points or 10 points or 20 or like 50 or 100 is usually, it's like pretty even. But Cloning Clyde was this like weird indie game that did this annoying thing where there were these achievements that were like 3 and like 7. And I remember like getting an achievement and seeing like my number just like a mess of just like uneven shit. And I was like, oh no, this is so painful to me that I cannot deal with. And I specifically like played that game, avoided. I looked up the achievements list and made sure I didn't get any achievements aside from one that would put me back on even. And then I got that achievement and deleted the game. And then like after that, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Even then, after that, I would only play games that I would make sure, unless it was like some big game, but big games don't usually do this. Unless I wouldn't play a game unless I could make sure that they didn't have this weird bullshit like 3, 7, 9.
Yeah, I remember some early on had 1. I remember that being a controversial thing where it was like 1 achievement.
Infuriating.
It was like I think people were just kind of figuring it out at that time, like not really knowing what to do. And then I don't know that you see that too much anymore. That's interesting. I would say for me, I'd have to go back and hit my head in a different way, I guess, as a kid, because I'm so OCD. I was thinking about it recently that it really makes perfect sense that I found my way to trophies. It just, when I consider just the way I operate and the things I like to do, I'm really into statistics and organization and collecting things and completing sets. And so what's so interesting is that when achievements came out, because I was writing strategy guides, I wrote a ton of strategy guides on Xbox 360. I just didn't give a fuck. I hated achievements. I hated them. And then for some reason, the trophies came and it just, I didn't care about them at first either. And then for some reason, something clicked to me where I'm like, oh, this seems because I was thinking about, remember Foursquare? I mean, it still exists, but 10 years ago, I was like so
Yeah.
obsessed with Foursquare. Not the game is fun, obviously, when you play with a ball, but Foursquare, the app where you would like log in or check into places and become the mayor of the various places you'd go and stuff. It all is interconnected to me. All right. Seth Bain has the final question before we get into what we're playing. He says, all right, boys, let's talk about the thermostat. What temperature do you prefer? And have you had any disputes with roommates and or family regarding the temperature? Personally, I prefer a broad range of 68 degrees to 72 degrees, but my roommate likes it closer to 77 or 78. Like she's a goddamn bearded dragon. We live in Texas, where it's close to 95 degrees 11 months of the year. Keep it cool, guys. This is a great question, actually, because this is a dispute in my own house. And I'm wondering, Chris, what is your comfortable thermostat temperature?
I would say like it's usually 68 to 72. I think that's my comfortable range.
Yeah.
You know, I like it to be cool, you know,
Right.
because outside is warm enough in Los Angeles. Like I don't need, if I want to be warm for a little bit, I'll step outside and it's no problem. And even in New York, most of the year, you could do that pretty reliably as well. I don't know. I don't understand the desire to keep it like really warm in a place that's already in a warm place, you know?
Sure.
Like there's a fireplace in my apartment right now in this Los Angeles apartment. I'm like, why? What could you possibly? It's insane. There's like central heating in some apartments as well over here and no central air. It's like, are you insane?
Yeah.
This is baffling.
It's
Open a window, dude.
It's crazy that people, I mean, I was blessed to have lived in LA only at a place with central air, but I knew people without central air and even some people without AC at all. And I'm like, I don't understand. That doesn't even seem like it's possible. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, no one has AC and you actually don't need it because it's so cool there, which I know surprises a lot of people. Dustin, what's your comfort zone?
I'm pretty close to Chris as well. And, you know, around 70, you know, maybe on a hot day, if I'm outside, I'll come in and click that down a little bit to 68. The more contention in my house comes to when it's cold outside and we need to heat up the house because I don't know, every year I become more like my dad and I'm like, we're not turning on the heat until October 1st, period. And it never happens. I try every year to see if we can do it, but I'm like very much the guy that's like, dude, put on a sweatshirt, get a blanket, let's go. We're keeping the heating bill down this year. So, but yeah, I like it on the cooler side always. So,
yeah,
me too. So in my house, Micah likes it warm, like in the 70s. That's not acceptable to me. I mean, I can't. Downstairs, we have zoned air in my house. So downstairs, we keep it on 70 or 72. Upstairs, we keep it on 70, but I drop it upstairs to 65 when I go to sleep, and like it nice and cold.
Very nice.
Here. Yeah. And then you wake up and you're fucking freezing. But I love sleeping in the cold. It's just nice. Something about being bundled up. And I also like being a little cold inside where I put on a sweatshirt.
Yeah.
You know, like I like having, it's hot out. It's cool inside, a little too cool. Put on the sweatshirt. Very comfortable.
Yeah,
comforting.
Yeah. It is nice. It's also just like, I don't know, like I can't sleep unless I have I can't do like the blanket thing. I need a quilt or like a thick like blanket to sleep. Like I can't do like that thin sheet. Like the fuck is that?
Oh yeah, I don't even have the sheet on the bed. I have the sheet like that's over the bed, but I don't have the sheet. Yeah. I just use.
I don't have the sheet either. I got rid of it. It's like useless. This is dumb.
Horrible.
But yeah, you can't. I like to be able to like bundle up and then wake up and not be, you know, having a heat stroke. You know.
Well, that would be ideal.
Keep that AC on. Blast it forever.
Indeed. The Earth's dying anyway. Who cares?
Yeah, fuck it. Yeah.
All right, let's get into what we're playing. Let's start with Dustin. We all are playing quite a few things here, so we have a lot to talk about. Dustin, let's take it over to you. Take it in whatever order you'd like.
So as I mentioned last week, I purchased It Takes Two during the podcast when Chris was talking about it. And Holly and I are absolutely loving this game. This game is going to be, it's not like my game of the year, but it is going to be one of the best games I've played this year, no doubt. And Holly totally agrees. And that's the best part, is that there's no need to convince her to play this game. It's just, I was trying to think of how to say this concisely. And a lot of co-op games are two people often doing the same thing or a very similar thing in order to achieve a goal. But this game over and over specifically gives you and the other person different tasks that then you have to work together in very unique ways in order to achieve the goal, which I guess the name of the game is It Takes Two. But it's so different than other co-op games I've played before. And this game just repeatedly has new ideas every level where I'm like, oh, it's like one of those games. You're like, oh, this is neat. This is cool that they thought of this. And it runs great. We're playing it on PS5 and we're playing it split screen, which I know that there's a way that you can play over the internet or whatever, PSN. And this game is just absolutely delightful. I got it for only $25 and it's worth more than that. I'm not done with it yet. I'm surprised how long it is. It keeps going, but not in a bad way. I'm like, wow, I don't know if it was just because I expected it to be a little shorter because as a co-op game, but there's a lot of content there. The last thing I will say is that this isn't necessarily a casual game. And that's one of its greatest assets to me is that if you are very much into games and you're thinking, wow, this will be a great way to get my wife, my husband, my son or daughter who's not into games to play, this isn't it.
No.
So Holly, who is experienced, who's like, she's beat Breath of the Wild and Dragon Quest, like she knows games pretty well. There's been a couple of instances that she's had some difficulties. So I think it's a great asset because it doesn't feel like a casual game in that sense.
Yeah. It's like a nice level of challenging where it's not like too ridiculous, but it's still mechanically complex enough to be engaging and interesting. And none of the levels are like interesting twists on gameplay mechanics last too long to be like to overstay their welcome. It's like really well paced.
Yeah.
I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, it's so good. I the only thing that I would say that is kind of negative is that some of the two main characters can get like a little, I don't want to say annoying, but they very easily rest into their two types and you almost can predict what they're going to say.
That's true.
But than that, highly recommend it. And then I'm still continuing my Halo playthrough. Finish 2 was awesome. I'm now on 3, which I think I've only played this game one time when it came out as far as the campaign, maybe twice then, but I'm having an absolute blast. And I'm kind of not dreading Halo 4 and 5, but I know that I'm in the peak right now playing 3.
You're in the pocket.
It's very good. And then of course Ghost of Tsushima, Iki Island. This one I've played the least, and it is very good. It is more Ghost of Tsushima. So if that's what you're looking for, that is exactly what it is. I've done, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 of the main missions and a couple of the side missions, and it looks great on PS5. I'm still unsure about the $10 upgrade because it looked really good before that also, but it's probably worth the money. I'm going to keep playing it. I'm going to finish it, but there's nothing about it that's like blowing me away. Like, whoa, this reinvents Ghost of Tsushima. It's just, whoa. It's very good. It's just good.
Cool. I've heard that too, that it's just more Ghost, which is fine. I kind of wonder, I'm kind of not into it. Like I want to buy, I want to buy it. I want to play it, but I just am more attracted to standalone DLC. That's like a little more buffed out. I was kind of hoping they were going to do something a little bit more like Infamous, where there would be something like a campaign, but also a reason to keep coming back. Remember, you keep going back. I forgot the female antagonist name, but you keep going to that arena and fighting her, and you build up your score. So there was like but I guess that's kind of like what Legends is. That's free. So they're trying to do some stuff there over at Sucker Punch. I appreciate it. It's on the list. I don't know when I'm going to get to it. I just am not a DLC person. I'm done with Ghost of Tsushima. I'm done with it. I don't want to play it again. It was great.
Here's the thing, Colin, too, is that
yeah, go ahead.
Dude, it's hard when you come back to the game. It's as if I don't know if it ramped up the difficulty or if I'm just completely don't even remember how to play. But I was like, man, I got to put this on easy mode, at least for a little bit, while I remember how to play the game. And that's kind of the frustrating part about some DLCs to me is I was like, man, I get it that they want it to be an expansion of the main game. But at the same time, so many people are coming back and then they're just hitting a wall instantly because I don't know, maybe you should replay the beginning part of the game in order to do it, but that's also kind of, I don't want to do that. So I'm just suffering a little bit.
Well, I understand that. I am thinking about playing Horizon again because I never played the Frozen Wilds DLC. Plus, there are New Game Plus trophies and stuff like that. And I think very hard trophies or something. But I think what they need to do, I mean, this is just from me as a trophyite, but give us some more. You know, like if you gave me more, you let all these companies get away with all of this nonsense with their trophies. Just absolute nonsense. 5-minute platinum trophies, all the rest. So what is wrong with you releasing the Frozen Wild with a platinum trophy? What's wrong with you releasing Iki Island with a platinum trophy? Like, why not? I mean, how is that not more valid than this bullshit? And now they're even getting crazier with it by bouncing the games between PS4 and PS5, just like we did with PS3 and Vita. So you're just popping the trophies twice. So that's the one thing for me where I'm like, give me a little bit more of the metagame incentive and I'll go back. But otherwise, I've moved on. I haven't played Ghost of Tsushima in a year, probably. You know, like I don't want to. It's just there are like so many other games to play. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. We have to do a spoiler cast for that at some point. So maybe we'll put that on you, Dustin. Cool. And that'll be it for you. No choice.
Sounds good.
I am but a man. And men, well, we have hair in places we don't really want it. A lot of it, actually, in bunches and bushels from head to toe. The question is there anything that can be done? Of course there is. My friends at Manscaped are well equipped, and dare I say even eager, to assist you in becoming more shiny and shorn. And it all begins with their 4th generation performance package, of which I am a satisfied user. The center of the so-called Performance Package 4.0 is the lawnmower trimmer. Now, this thing can be used to keep the back of your neck straight or to trim your beard. I use it for both. But it's specially designed to keep that crotch and butt area in shape. I don't need to be more specific, do I? You and I both know you're fumbling down there with a razor, and you really, really shouldn't. God only knows what one nick of the blade may do to you. The lawnmower is safe, effective, battery-powered, and it even comes packing an onboard light, so that you don't lose anything in your bodily crevices. And it can be used on your chest, armpits, and more. It's great. Also in the performance package is the Weed Whacker, an ear and nose hair trimmer that I proudly proclaimed just weeks ago in an ad I was too young to need. But it turns out that's not true. I have gray hairs growing out of my ears, or at least I did, thanks to the Weed Whacker. Of course, there's more. Lotions and ointments and even a carrying case. And you could of course buy all sorts of Manscaped items a la carte. After all, the company has had more than 2 million customers to date. But really, it's all about that lawnmower, that performance package 4.0. Once you get your hands on it, you will truly understand. So give Manscaped a try. Get 20% off your order with free shipping by using the code SACRED at manscaped.com. That's SACRED at MANSCAPED.com. That's 20% off your order with free shipping by using the code SACRED at manscaped.com. Make your balls a priority this fall. Choose Manscaped. Your balls will thank you.
Chris, you are playing a couple of games as well, including one that I'm actually really interested in. But talk to us in any order that you want.
Yeah, so I'll start with 12 minutes.
Yes, that's the one.
Which is this over like top down point and click kind of narrative driven game where you like make choices, and it's like a time loop game. It's got like all these big name actors. It's got Willem Dafoe. It's got Daisy Ridley. It's got James McAvoy, all taking place in this like kind of central apartment. And it's a point and click, and it's infuriating. I sincerely hate it. Which is wild.
Why?
Because
why?
Well, it feels like this. So it's so hard to explain why it's so infuriating, but like a lot of the times when you have a game that's like driven by actors and you have like, hey, here's this Hollywood actor, you're kind of expecting a level of polish in the narrative that is just not there. And it's like really confusing. It's not that anybody's doing like a bad job. Like I think that all the actors are doing exactly what they need to do, but the way that they coded it is weird, because you'll select something and then James McAvoy will turn around and he'll be like, so you're a terrible person, aren't you? And it's like, what? And the delivery's weird. And then like sometimes the characters will act as if information that had been talked about before is suddenly like new, and they'll have like a completely different mood, and it's just kind of like clumsily put together. And then the point and click logic, I know point and click logic has already been kind of like stretched and like very bizarre like throughout the history of point and click games. It's like, oh, combine the worm with the lantern to make a flashlight, and you're like, okay. But this is an extra layer where it all takes place in like maybe like 3 rooms. So it's extra infuriating when you find this one thing that you like had no reason to assume. Like, why would dragging a knife to a dresser open up a vent underneath it that
This
isn't
is adventure game
interactable?
shit. I can't. This is adventure game shit. That's why I just don't like adventure games. You're explaining it.
And it's a time loop. So like if you fuck up, you only have like 12 minutes, I think. It's actually probably like less than
Is it
that
real time?
I think it's less than that in real time. I'm fairly certain. I feel like 12 minutes would be like a bit much, but it's less than that in the game. But you only have that much time to figure out what you need to do. And if you don't figure out what you need to do, you need to start it all over again, which means you have to have the same conversations again, which means you need to have the same narrative happening over and over again and like trying different things. And like, I get that that's like fun for people. I don't understand how, because I'm just listening to the same lines of dialogue over and over again. And it's infuriating, and it gets boring, and it's so grating. I wouldn't say that this is like a bad game, but it's one that I just cannot appreciate whatever this game is doing, because I've seen some people say like it's great. You know, I know like there are people whose opinions on video games that I respect a great deal, and I looked up their opinions on it after I had decided that I was like, you know what, I can't do it. I wonder what people are saying, and it's like super mixed. Like some people are like, this is terrible. Other people are like, this is genuinely fantastic. It's like a work of art, and it's like it's interesting as a video game. And that's probably the best thing I could say about it. Is I don't know how your average player or your average even listener of this podcast will react to this game if they choose to check it out. It's free on Game Pass. That's the way that I would recommend you play it.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I don't know, man. It's a rough one.
It has a pretty good Metacritic score of 79, I think, or 76. I'm looking at it right now on Xbox Series X. But it's this. I think it's one dude that made it, right, Luis Antonio. But if I were him, I'd be like, you fuckers, because there's like all these 9s and then like some 5s or whatever, and so it seems like it's a divisive game like that. But it is intriguing. I was reading one of the one of the write-ups for the reviews, and they were saying that there was this other guy that worked at Ubisoft, I think, with Luis Antonio at one time, and were saying that they wanted to create, or there was this idea to create, I guess, a game that was just a city street because of the mechanical depth that would be allowed if you just focused in this one place. And so you would expect, even reducing that more, that you would have unreal depth, that if you as a developer, you're obsessing over this apartment from a top-down perspective, obsess over every inch of it, right, in the real world, and have it all contained so that it would be executed flawlessly. I think this is why a game like Gone Home, in my opinion, shines so well, although I know you don't agree, while others fall by the wayside, and why typically the adventure genre is just a dead end for me. Because it requires this leaps of logic where I'm like, I remember thinking that when I was a little kid playing on Apple II and 386 PCs, where I'm like, I don't understand why in Maniac Mansion this means this. How am I supposed to know that? That's why I always deferred to action games. I knew friends that would play these fucking PC games where it would be like, you'd have to type shit in, like playing King's Quest or something, and it's like, open chest, open door, pick up sword. It's like, what is this?
Yeah, text-based adventure, yeah.
It's fun, but I mean, it's funny. I don't know if it's fun.
Well, I will say, man, Gone Home is 100 times better than 12 minutes. Like, I enjoyed my time with Gone Home way more than I enjoyed my time with 12 minutes. And, you know, that's my opinion. I'm sure like a ton of people are going to write in and be like, I loved it. And
well,
like,
don't write. It's not a PlayStation game, so we'll not talk about it here. But maybe when we...
It's on PlayStation, though, isn't it?
No, not yet. I'm sure it will be.
Wait, is it really not?
No.
It's just on PC and Xbox?
Yeah, it's an Xbox.
Oh, that's weird. I thought it's the whole reason I brought it up.
Oh, no, it's okay. We can talk about whatever we want on the show. I'm just saying we'll wait to have deeper fan conversations until the game comes. I don't see why it wouldn't come over. And when it does, I will play it because it is intriguing. You know what was intriguing to me about it? I don't know if you guys saw this, but the one thing was that Hideo Kojima had said that it's like one of the best games he's played in years. And I was like, okay. And we'll get into something I'm playing of his in a moment, but you're also playing Chris, Destiny 2 Season of the Lost. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it's a new Destiny season. We're obviously going to talk a little bit more about Destiny later on in the show, but so I don't want to get too ahead of myself. But it's a new season. There's like a whole balancing shift. There's some new story stuff that's happening. It's fun. Destiny's really found a nice cadence for me where like I jump in and I do a lot of activities and I have a good time, and then I just sort of like, all right, I've fulfilled the amount of, I've done what I need to do. I've had my fun. I'm going to put it down for a little while and then like play some other stuff and, just delve into some other stuff. And then the new season starts and it's got all this new shit. And it actually is like a really genuinely good and feature rich seasonal model that I feel like they've stumbled into. They found their cadence. They found a good rhythm. And it's still Destiny 2, but it's also still fun and it's still engaging. The narrative is finally like at this place where it's actually building and actual characters are interacting, and it's been that way for like I think the last like few seasons, but it's nice to see it continue. And obviously with the Witch Queen coming later, that's a whole nother thing, but it's good. It's still Destiny 2. It's still good. I'm enjoying it.
Excellent. Yeah, like you said, we'll talk more about Destiny 2 a little bit later. There's much more to say about it.
Yeah.
As for me, I have a trio of games to talk about. So Ender Lilies, Quietest of the Nights, I've been talking about for a little while. This Japanese Metroidvania. Played it for a couple weeks. Spent about 25 hours with it, and I finally beat it and then platinumed it. There are 3 endings, so I did all 3 endings in very Castlevania-like fashion. I wrote on so I announced all my platinums, as I think the audience knows, on Twitter, and I'm starting to use in recent years, and I don't know if I've reflected on this publicly, but I'm starting to use Twitter more as like a journal, because I've been going through my old tweets and I've been slowly like just deleting a bunch of shit. Like I have a bunch of tweets that just to people like thanks or yes, or like I'm giving away codes. Like I just don't want any of this stuff. It doesn't need to exist anymore. But I'm going through and reading a lot of it. And I'm like, this is a really wonderful look back at my life. Like that will just exist in perpetuity. So I throw those platinums up there. But when I did, I said that it's basically Hollow Knight meets Castlevania Aria of Sorrow or Dawn of Sorrow. Maybe with a little bit of a Japanese twist and maybe like a splash of Limbo. And it's a great game. I really highly recommend it. It's got an 89 Metacritic score. So it's no joke on that front if you care about numeric criticism, but it's a really, really good Metroidvania. It's pretty, it's haunting. You play as a little girl who is actually not attacking anything. She uses these spirits she finds to attack for her. So when you hit, you assign different buttons to them however you want. There are a few dozen of them. And that's why it's like Aria of Sorrow. And then, so like you hit the attack button and she just stands there. She's just a little girl in a white dress and she just stands there. And then a knight like comes in front and like swipes and then disappears. Or a knight comes and like smashes a hammer and disappears and stuff like that. It's really cool. So highly recommend it if you are interested in Metroidvanias. And if you like Hollow Knight, I really think you're going to like this game. I don't think it's not going to be as acclaimed as Hollow Knight. It's definitely not as good as Hollow Knight, but it's pretty close. I'm also playing Dodgeball Academia. Finally, I've been looking forward to playing this for a few weeks. This game was made in Brazil, which is really exciting because we don't get very many games from Brazil. And it's just a very cute Japanese-inspired role-playing game, action role-playing game where you are at a dodgeball academy and you are just in a dodgeball team and you fight other dodgeball teams. And it's like you're in these battles and it's really cool. So like it's 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 and you can toggle between your characters and catch the ball as it comes to you. Everyone has like special attacks. You have hit points and magic points and you get experience points and you have a party and exploration, side quests, all that. I'm a few hours in. It's really fun. I'm really liking it a lot. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that this weekend. And then the third game, as I said earlier, I'm playing Kojima, Metal Gear Solid 2. I'm playing for Knockback. And I wanted to read this letter from Sam War, who said, "Hey, CDC, started playing Supergiant's Hades on PS5, and I'm loving it. I got to get to that. I mean, it's on my cross-media bar. I originally played it on Switch and enjoyed the game. However, playing it on PS5 makes it hit differently. Was there a moment when this happened to you, showing you a change in hardware and performance or controller input can make a good game into an amazing experience?" I thought this was an interesting question, Sam, because a couple weeks ago, I had noted that I'd started playing Metal Gear Solid 2 on Vita, and I just couldn't play it there. It just felt like shit. Like, it really did. It just felt, I couldn't believe how bad it was, where I was like, I can't play this. Could it be that Metal Gear Solid 2 is out of my reach now? I remember being in 12th grade when it came out and just blazing through it. And I just couldn't play it. So people were suggesting play it on PS3. So I plugged in my PlayStation 3. I haven't played a PlayStation 3 game since BioShock Infinite, which I played over the holiday season for Knockback last year. And so I had to update it. Then I had to update the store. Then I had to go into the store and figure out if I own this game digitally. I don't, because I own it physically, but it's at my brother's. So then I had to buy for $15. Thank God the PSN still accepts sales on PS3. I figured out how to find it. The store is so bad on PlayStation 3 right now that I wonder if they're doing it on purpose. Dude, it takes like several minutes for the store to load. Like, no joke, where I was like, should I restart the console? Or then when I was in the store once, it froze on me, and you couldn't find the game by searching for Metal Gear Solid. You had to search for the game as Sons of Liberty, then it would pop up. All sorts. So
oh my God.
After several hours, I finally got this thing from stem to stern. I finally got this thing downloaded on my console, and I booted it up. I wasn't very hopeful. Two funny things happened. First of all, I had a save in, I guess, the transferring cloud from 2012. So that popped into my thing. But then I started a game, and I was like, oh, there we go. It just feels so much better. Metal Gear Solid 2 is still frozen in time. It doesn't have a 3D camera. You shoot with the square button. It's very weird. But
yeah,
man, Sam, to your question, I was really worried for a while. I'm like, wow, Metal Gear Solid 2 fell off a cliff at some point over the last 15 or 20 years, because I don't remember it being this bad.
Opposite. That's the exact opposite of my experience, where I tried to play it on console and I hated it.
Really? And then you played it on Vita? Because I couldn't hold. What I was finding was I couldn't hold anyone up on Vita. Like, I couldn't do it. You know, like,
oh really?
No, I could only do it because you use, the first person camera, then you have to hit the square button at the same time. There's like some weird thing. Oh, and it's because it's just a button on Vita. It's not whatever the digital button on
the pressure sensor.
Yeah. So
that's weird. I remember holding people.
So some people.
This is I don't remember how I did it though.
Well, this is a big controversy. Well, not controversy, but a lot of people talking about it online about being like, well, the Vita version's the one for me, or the PS3 version's the one for me. And I'm like, man, the PS3 version made it so much better. And I'll save my Metal Gear Solid 2 talk for Knockback, but I will say this. It looks pretty fucking good. I actually was really surprised. Now it's updated by Bluepoint to 1080. Yeah. But I was really surprised, and there was a lot of little graphical hitches and just touches where I'm like, this is really quite ahead of its time. And I'm looking forward to talking about it, but I'll save it for that. All right. Boys, we're an hour or so into the show. So let's get into the news. We have a big one up at the top. Number one, Horizon Forbidden West, the sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn, finally has a release date. It will launch on both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 on February 18th, 2022. Such a decision was clearly in the cards since around E3, when Sony's Herman Hulst, the head of Sony's first-party studios, noted that they were undecided on the game's 2021 arrival. Forbidden West, which started development exclusively on PS4 before moving over to PS5 part of the way through, will launch nearly 5 years to the date. 5 years to the date, Horizon Zero Dawn came to PS4 in early 2017 and will be available for digital pre-order beginning in September. Additionally, Horizon Zero Dawn has been given a free patch that will bring it to 60 frames on PS5. Both Horizon games under development by Sony-owned Dutch studio Guerrilla marks the studio's first foray out of the FPS genre following a succession of Killzone titles at one time PlayStation's marquee shooter series. Forbidden West will be the next first or second party game launched from the Sony family. Samuel Mills wrote in and said, hello, gents. Hope you're all doing well. Don't know if you're doing a breakdown of Gamescom. We're really not. I mean, this comes from Gamescom, and we're going to talk about a bunch of Gamescom announcements, but no Gamescom breakdown per se. Wanted to know what you thought about the release date for Horizon Forbidden West, though. Do you think they'll hit that date? Richard Hogue brought up the interesting point on Twitter that the lawyer in him wishes game devs would start using phrases more like plans to release or aiming to hit in regards to announcing release dates. Since so many games have been delayed this year, it might not be a bad idea, but also sounds like a bit of a cop-out. Thoughts on this? Anyway, I'm personally excited they released a 60 frames patch for Zero Dawn. So, Dustin, let's start with you on this one. What do you think? First of all, do I think that to Samuel's question, do I think that this is the release date? Yes, I do think this is the release date. Also, I mean, I'm not going to make it a Colin was right moment because I think it was obvious, but I was right. I mean, it's coming out 5 years almost to the date that the original came out. Now, my theory about them releasing a director's cut or a PS5 native version may not be in the cards because of the 60 frames patch. I don't know. But what do you think about the date, the timing, and all of the rest? Are you still looking forward to it? What do you think?
Oh, yeah, definitely still looking forward to it. It was interesting how they spun this on Keeley's thing, because they were like, we're happy to announce now that it's coming out in February. It was not an apology. It was very all positive, which again, it's like one of those things where it takes as much time as you need, but it was just an interesting way that they navigated around delaying it that I haven't seen quite before. But yeah, I mean, this makes sense. I think in particular where they're in the Netherlands, right? They went into lockdown again after the last state of play. So I can imagine that maybe if that wouldn't have happened, maybe we would be playing this game this year. But lockdown obviously slows down development probably quite a bit. So the question, I guess, overall is how busy the first half of 2022 is going to be, because it is getting stacked. And I mean, this happens every few years. We talked about the cycles of release dates and games coming out. It seems like 2022, I mean, obviously brought on by a pandemic that has delayed a bunch of games. But in addition, it's year 2 of new hardware, which is also a busy time. So it's exciting. I kind of I look forward to the craziness in a way.
I feel like in some sense that, well, first of all, really nice insight about the Netherlands. I feel like at that time they gave themselves the appropriate wiggle room, and we had discussed that ad nauseum at that time, that I thought that they gave up the ghost at that point when they said we don't know yet. I'm like, well, that means the game's coming out in 2022. There's just no way that you're not going to give, knowing that you could or couldn't give yourself the wiggle room, knowing that you could or couldn't afford it. I don't know what you're trying to line up, but I think we're golden in that sense. And I'm excited to play the game in February. I note that a lot of people are concerned that there's no first or second party game coming out in the fall, and this does suck, but I remind you that they typically do not release games in the fall. So, or the winter. I mean, what game came out in the fall or winter that you can even think of that was important?
It's usually like September, right? Like that's usually like the latest that they go.
Like I think about Uncharted 3 coming out in November of 2011. That was huge. PlayStation All-Stars. But that was like the PS3 era. When you really think about the PS4 era, I mean, I don't know, like there were the launch games in 2013 and then 2014, 2015. I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like very much. So I don't think we're going to be missing very much. I'm not worried about that angle. Just wanted to throw that out there. But Chris, what do you think about Horizon Forbidden West coming February 18th to PS4, PS5? Are you looking forward to it? And how are you feeling about it reaching this date?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that they're going to reach it. Like, I was actually looking up before you started reading about like what the restrictions were in the Netherlands currently, and it's, like clubs are still like closed, and like people are still like currently like supposed to social distance. It's like it's definitely like a different situation over there than it is like in most places in the US. And I think the little words there that he said, like, oh, like plans to, aiming to hit, I feel like that's just in case things get worse, which I don't necessarily think they will, but I'm pretty confident that they're probably going to hit this date. Yeah, like I don't think unless some crazy shit happens,
right?
Which is always in the cards. But
yeah, there's a very short letter on PlayStation Blog from Matthias de Jong, who's the director of the game, and just says they were hugely impacted by the global pandemic, and they're trying to keep a healthy life-work balance. Now, they are, by the time, not quite by the time this goes live, but a little bit after, you can actually start pre-ordering it. So I just think that the cat's out of the bag. I think it's ready to go.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I'm not going to pre-order it until next year when it's ready to get downloaded to my console, but you can do that now. And again, remember, the patch is available for you if you want to play Horizon. The original one on PS5, I believe that's in the PlayStation Plus collection. So that would just be free for you if you want a PS5. All right. I really want to know what you guys think of this one. Number 2. It's been a long while, but the Saints Row franchise is finally coming back. The new game, simply entitled Saints Row, is under development at the studio known as Volition, the team long behind the Saints Row franchise, going all the way back to the 2006 original, which never saw release on PlayStation. Its 2008 sequel, Saints Row 2, did come to PS3, however, and Saints Row the Third landed in 2011 on PS3. Saints Row 4 came to PS3 in 2013 and PS4 in 2015, and a spin-off called Agents of Mayhem launched in 2017. This game, which was revealed for the first time at Gamescom, has long been rumored to be in development. Indeed, it probably entered development in 2018, which is why it's going to be ready so soon. It comes to both PS4 and PS5 on February 25th, 2022. As you may recall, Volition was once owned by the original THQ and was sold off to Koch Media for $22.3 million during the subsequent bankruptcy proceedings. Along with the Volition acquisition came the Saints Row IP, and it's now technically back with THQ since Koch Media was the keeper of the THQ Nordic name and has since been folded into the expansive Embracer Group. Volition, which was also at one time in charge of the early PS2 RPG franchise Summoner and the Red Faction FPS series. There should be a math game called Red Faction. Hasn't put out a game since 2017 and is likely aiming to fill in the gap left behind by the absence of titles like Grand Theft Auto, which Saints Row was in many ways modeled upon. So, well, let's just go to Joshua Anderson right away, who wrote into us on Patreon and says, "Sup, fellas? Did you guys watch the new Saints Row reboot trailer? And if so, what are your thoughts? To me, it feels like they are finally going back to the formula that made Saints Row 3 one of my all-time favorite games. With GTA 6 years out and GTA 5 on constant re-release, this feels like the perfect opportunity to find footing. It also has a shot at being Embracer Group's biggest franchise and moneymaker. Anyway, thoughts? Thank you, Joshua, for writing in. Chris, what do you think about this? I was happy to see this because I feel like when you really look at all of the studios that Embracer ended up owning, and when you think about Deep Silver and THQ Nordic and kind of the early embryonics post THQ era, Volition was the big team. If people remember, Volition was like the really big thing that was available. And it was like if people remember the fire sale, like it was actually quite interesting because companies were publicly bidding on IP, on studios, and all the rest. And THQ Nordic, or what would become THQ Nordic, ended up getting Volition, Saints Row, Red Faction, and all the rest. And then Volition kind of just went silent. I mean, they made that Agents of Mayhem game no one really liked. People have been waiting for them to come back and do this. I think it's pretty cool. And I agree with Joshua that this is a chance for them to get into a Grand Theft Auto mold in their own way, which is what the original attempt was, of course. Although I disagree with what he's saying, because a lot of people are saying that this reminds them more of the first two Saints Row games, not the third one. But anyway, I'll let you take it however you want.
Yeah, I'm a little conflicted on this because part of me is like, yeah, okay, so it's good to see Saints Row back because I know a lot of people have been wanting Saints Row back, and I know that there is a hole in single player open world kind of like GTA style games that we used to have kind of like a lot of, and now we don't really, especially with GTA on constant GTA Online service. This is a good chance for Saints Row to exist again. At the same time, personally, I always found like the goofiness and the absurdity of Saints Row fun, but not necessarily like super engaging. Like I appreciated it, and it was like ridiculous, and it's like, oh, look, I have a big silly mascot head on. This is fun, and it just kind of felt not like a one-trick pony, but it felt like it didn't really have much else outside of the absurdity to it. And when I saw the dude in the trailer put on his like Watch Dogs 2 like helmet with like the little like emoticon on it, I'm just like, I've seen this like a million times in the last like 10 years. Like this weird like absurdist art style and just like the wackiness. I've seen this. This is like every Fortnite skin for the last like several years. And I know that they kind of pioneered that in a weird way. I understand that like Saints Row 3 was kind of like the first time that was really like common to see like, oh, this game's not taking itself too seriously and it's like silly and wacky and like, so it has a lot of leeway in that sense where they're not necessarily like copying so much as they are just like doing what they've always done. But to me, as like someone who's like a bit of an outsider, it just looks like more of what I'm already kind of sick of. It's, I don't know. Like, I'm happy that Saints Row is back. It's a very important game, especially for Volition and especially for that publisher. and I know it's got a lot of fans, and I'm sure it'll probably be very good. It's just, I don't know if this CGI trailer did anything for me. I think I'd rather wait until there's actual gameplay that I can look at and kind of get a understanding of how the game feels to play, and like maybe then I'll start to feel a little bit differently. But for right now, Saints Row is cool, but never really been my thing.
Yeah, it's funny. It feels like, I didn't know you at that time, but it feels like a game that I think you would agree helped pioneer or identify Xbox 360 specifically. Because that game, to me, and I had forgotten about this, but it never came to PlayStation 3. It just never came. So
The original,
yeah. So it would be cool for them to release those two games. They obviously did release Saints Row the Third again, which was cool. I would like to go back and play it because that's the only one I ever even delved any with any depth into. And then they did Get Out of Hell and all that kind of stuff after Saints Row 4. But Dustin, what are your thoughts here on the re-rise of Volition? Good to see them back on the scene. It's nice to see people excited for a Volition game for the first time in a long time. And yeah, I feel like now is the time. Like, people want it's just kind of shocking how there are no Grand Theft Auto games. But I don't know what is going on, but people have a craving for a Ballad of Gay Tony, a craving for, you know, a GTA 5 style DLC pack. If they're not going to give it to them, then at least give us a little something different. And Saints Row to me always seemed like to be one of those parallels. We got a lot of them, right? Like Godfather and all these other random games. Mafia was one of them as well. But I just always felt like this one was kind of most akin to it.
Right. I'm kind of in this almost the exact same boat as Chris, where I've tried to get into these games. Like the one I put the most amount of time into was Saints Row the Third, and I think that it's clearly, if we think about games as a product, it's clearly meets a demand that we've been discussing. This idea of a more frequent Grand Theft Auto style game that comes out. To me, and for my personal taste, it's just like doesn't even come close to the quality of a Grand Theft Auto game or what I'm looking for, I guess, out of that. Like, Saints Row is perfect for the people that love to go and play GTA games and fuck around in the city and love the wild, wacky aspects of it. And I get into that as well.
Also a good checkbox game as well.
Right.
Yeah.
To me, it's more akin to like, I mean, now I guess you could say, I don't want to say like Watch Dogs, because Watch Dogs also kind of was like doing its own style. I guess when we define a GTA style game, we think of open world city with cars, right? And now we've kind of that not genre, but that type of game there's a lot more of them now. I kind of would have liked them to do something new, but I guess they tried something new with Agents of Mayhem and it didn't work out. So it's like, well, we might as well go back to the well and make the 5th Saints Row game. But again, I think this looks like a great product that a lot of people will go for because they're looking for that GTA style game. It doesn't appeal to me really at all.
Yeah, I can understand that. Again, to Chris's point too, it's a CG trailer. We don't know what the game's going to look like, but when I saw that, because we knew Saints Row was going to come back at some point. I mean, the rumors have been percolating for a while. Volition exists and hadn't done anything in a long time. So we knew that this was going to happen, but it was just, I was kind of like, yeah, this is great. Late February, we're going to be able to play it. I'm going to play it. I'm looking forward to it. All right. Number 3, a new Marvel game is coming to consoles, though it may not be what you'd expect unless you've been paying attention to rumors over the last few months. The game is called Midnight Suns, and it's an XCOM-like turn-based strategy game developed by 2K-owned team Firaxis. Aiming for launch on both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 in March of 2022, this game is notable for many reasons, among them the fact that this is only the second time in Firaxis' 25-plus year history that it will develop and simultaneously release a game on both PC, where it's best known, and console. The only other Firaxis game to be released on all platforms simultaneously prior to this was when XCOM 2 came out in 2016. Firaxis, which was also a notable supporter of Vita with games like the original XCOM and Civilization Revolution 2, is perhaps best known for its long-running Civilization series, the 6th of which came to PS4 in 2019, though that series did start with Microprose before Firaxis even existed. This title does, however, mark publisher Take-Two's first foray into the Marvel gaming market. one that has seen Sony, Square Enix, and Nintendo all do well to varying degrees, especially Sony, which is essentially tied in with Spider-Man, and with that series being one of PlayStation's most popular. I didn't see this when I watched, by the way, that Spider-Man trailer, which was fucking cool. I will say, a very cool trailer. Loved it.
Yeah.
And I haven't even seen all these Spider-Man movies, but when I saw who was that, Dr. Octopus? Is that who that is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, that's pretty fucking cool. Like
From
that.
the original.
Yeah.
I'm so pumped. I hate it. I hate that I'm excited.
Now,
But-
now, brief aside, do you think he's talking to Tobey Maguire? Because that's what everyone was thinking, right?
I think so,
Yeah, that's
which
pretty-
would make me very happy.
Pretty cool.
But
I like that a lot. So I agree with you on that. That has nothing to do with what we're saying here, though. I just wanted to bring that up for no reason. I guess with Spider-Man, of course. But
yeah,
this is interesting. And, I want to kick this over. Let's see. I guess I'll go to Dustin first on this. What is your thought on, I don't know, like Marvel and Disney kicking their stuff around and kicking the tires of every company? I said this on Twitter. We got some interesting feedback. Someone actually from WB, kind of a rival now, right, because of the DC license, had responded saying like, not so much, because you cultivate this talent and then they go. And I'm like, well, you have all the money and you have the IP and the license, so you stay if you want, or you buy that company if you want. But I love that they're going around and just democratizing these games. I think they learned a really significant lesson from Star Wars and what they did with EA. They fucked that entire thing up and wasted years of Star Wars Prime on games that never came out. And
yeah,
I think they realized they probably should have let 1313 come out, and they canceled that well. And I mean, everyone knows someone that worked on that game, and the industry was huge. So
Right.
I feel like they learned a lesson, and they're like, let's just let the good shit come to us. Imagine a situation where you make your portfolio known to these companies behind the scenes and just say, pitch us. That's fucking amazing. I mean, and I think that's what maybe they're doing here. So this XCOM like Marvel game is real. I'm not going to play it because I don't like the way XCOM feels personally. It's a game that I really want to like, but I don't. But how do you feel about Marvel? What is this called again? Midnight Suns.
Midnight Suns. I'm so conflicted about this. As you know, Colin, in the audience, I made Marvel illegal many episodes ago. So I got to stand by my word here.
Well, you're the commandant, though. You can make the different rules here as you please.
Yeah. Well, it's weird. I think Firaxis is a great company. Civilization 5 and 6 were both really, really, really good games. I really loved the original XCOM reboot. We'll say XCOM. What was that? Enemy Within or Enemy Unknown? Enemy Unknown. And then
Enemy
they did
Unknown,
Within,
yeah.
I think was like a expansion or something. So I loved that one. XCOM 2, they kind of changed some stuff that I think makes sense from a gameplay standpoint, but they made the missions timed, which really bothered me, which it probably makes sense from a gameplay standpoint. That's like, you can't sit here for 15 minutes and think about what gun you're going to shoot. But at the same time, imagine that battle if
That's
World War II went down that way.
I love turn-based battles, but it really doesn't make any sense. I'm just sitting like very tense thing, and I'm just in my menu like looking at my items.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It did XCOM 2. I was excited about it. And something about it did not sit well with me. I got really frustrated with it. Maybe I need to give it another go. But so this one it's doubly conflicting in that I just don't want to say I don't care about Marvel anymore. I'm done with it at this point. I think what they're doing is cool. If you like Marvel and you're still into it since 2008 or whatever with Iron Man, great. I'm happy that you found something you love that much. I will never find anything I love that much. Maybe that's why I'm sad. But I can't, like, the fact that I'm like, is this going to be more like XCOM 2? It's also subject matter I don't really care about, but I like Firaxis. So is it Firaxis or I've heard it's like like
It's Firaxis as far as I understand.
Firaxis.
Like Firaxis. Like Firaxis. Yeah, that's how I understand.
Jaguar, Firaxis, cool.
Oh, you know
Yeah,
what? I totally. Hold on a second.
Oh,
he's gonna pull out a fucking Jaguar,
oh,
and he's gonna have it tell you how it's pronounced.
oh no. Oh my goodness.
What is this?
A listener sent me something for you,
Oh, for
and
me.
I made an exception because I usually don't allow people to send us stuff because I don't want it.
Don't
but-
you dare.
I don't know if you can see it.
Oh my god, dude, is that an Atari shirt for the
Yeah.
audio listeners? That's amazing.
So
It's an Atari shirt that says
Jaguar.
Jaguar.
So
Jaguar.
It's the Jaguar logo instead of.
That's amazing.
So someone.
It says.
Yeah, you
and
can't see because
it's
our
spelled
stuff
out.
our stuff gets so.
It says Jaguar.
It says Jaguar on it. Yes, for
That
people that
is
don't know, we use
amazing.
our program that we use keeps latency low by just reducing the quality of our own communications.
I can see it now.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to find the name. I'll find the name of that person. I'll bring that shirt for you when I see you. But
That's beautiful. I
that
absolutely love that.
reminded me. Yeah, sorry.
So
That's
anyway,
pretty
yeah,
amazing.
I'm conflicted. That's my overall take.
I understand. It's so funny you say this because Dagan and I are kind of moving through Marvel movies now. We did Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. We also did Iron Man recently on Knockback. And so I'm kind of like feeling it a little bit right now where I'm like, this is kind of fun, and then Miles Morales was great. And the new I actually saw Into the Spider-Verse as well, which I thought was awesome because we had to do that for Knockback. Then this trailer, I was like, well, I've always kind of liked Spider-Man. So I think I'm kind of like a closeted Spider-Man fan in some way. I don't know very much, to be honest.
Spider-Man is the best one.
Yeah, I would say, I would agree. I mean, there's some members of, because I loved the X-Men when I was a kid and I like some of them too. But when you really think about it, like I liked Colossus a lot and a few others, but I'm like, I mean, he's fine, but it's like, Psylocke was really cool, kind of hot.
The people who like X-Men usually are people who like them from the comics. Like Kingston, my Sweeney, my roommate, loves the X-Men because he's like a comic book fan. He's like, it's like they're a family, and it's like, cool. I don't read those though, so it's fine.
All I know is the redheaded chick from Game of Thrones played, who was it, Jean Grey or something? Or is that even right? Is that right? I don't know.
All I know is
No, you're right about that.
Okay. Because I remember seeing her on the side of a bus in Los Angeles, and I'm like, oh, it's a Stark girl.
Yeah. Well, it's already left my mind. Like I watched every episode of that show, and I'm like, eh.
Yeah, and mine too. Mostly because it ended so badly. But let's get back into this. Chris, I'm curious what your take is on this. Are you an XCOM guy? I don't take you as one, but I don't know if that's a serious.
I don't know. Like I've been getting into like tactics games a little bit more lately. But I have yet to try XCOM. I think the reason why I put off tactics games so much is because so many tactics games take place in universes that I just don't really give a shit about. Like I don't know what the hell XCOM is. It doesn't even sound real. It sounds fake. Like XCOM doesn't sound like an actual anything. And then like Final Fantasy Tactics obviously was just never like it's too anime. I can't do it. But then I think when Gears Tactics came out, it's like, oh, I'm familiar with Gears, and I got into it. It's like, oh, this is like a simple kind of like, this is fun. This is kind of cool. I understand it, and I think now I can start branching into stuff like this. What I'm curious most about this is like, this strikes me, and I understand that these aren't the same types of games, but this strikes me as like an Ultimate Alliance tactics type deal. And I loved Ultimate Alliance. Like the original Marvel's Ultimate Alliance is like one of my favorite. I love that game so much when it came out. It was like such a fun romp through that universe. And that was before the MCU, so it was actually like, enjoyable. But or it didn't overstay its welcome, or it wasn't super oversaturated. It was like a nice like novelty to have like a Marvel game that played that way. And if it can kind of like if it can capture some of that, even though it's not the exact same type of game and like the isometric kind of like Marvel team up, I think that could be a fun game, and I might give it a shot when it comes out. It's probably, I'm more familiar with Marvel than I am with XCOM, certainly. So if there's a tactics type game that I'm going to play, it's probably going to be this one, just out of sheer ease of entry. So I'm curious about it. I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. Yeah, I know a lot of people are looking forward to it as well. That's March, so right after. So we have Saints Row. Let me see here. So we've talked about it so far. Forbidden West, February 18th. Saints Row, February 25th. XCOM. No, well, Midnight Suns. Let's call it that instead. March of 2022. Number 4. I'm interested to see what you think of this one, Chris. Destiny 2's eagerly awaited expansion Witch Queen has a release date as well as new details worth discussing. Players can purchase and download it for both PS4 and PS5 beginning on February 22nd of 2022. So the same day, right? A few days later of Horizon. God, all these games are coming out in the same week. Perhaps the largest addition this expansion brings with it, apart from that, all that we would expect, is a crafting system that is common in other games, but which will be totally new to Destiny and is bound to make the loot grind and subsequent manufacture of new items all the more heated. According to the game's website, Melee will take center stage, and obviously the Witch Queen expansion will come packing new locations, missions, character story, and more. Destiny 2, which launched in 2017 as the sequel to 2014's original game, has truly found its cadence. Indeed, there's a plan to support the game fully until at least through 2024. The Witch Queen is slated to begin the 5th year of Destiny 2 support from developer Bungie, following previous packs like 2019's Shadowkeep. As for Bungie, the studio, once owned by Microsoft and responsible for the Halo franchise before getting into bed with Activision for a time, was founded way back in 1991 when it first made macOS exclusive titles, and it had an intimate relationship with Apple before Microsoft swung in to wisely claim Halo for its own as a launch game for the original Xbox in 2001. Chris, what do you think? I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's 30th anniversary. It's fucking crazy. Like, dude, this was so exciting. Like, this was such a good reveal. And it was so awkward too, because like the Destiny reveal opened that day and then Xbox had their stream afterwards, and it was so hilarious. Like the varying levels of quality, because Destiny showcase was so good. And then Xbox was like, isn't it crazy how we had trebuchets or whatever in like medieval times?
What was up with that? It's like
I don't know.
10 minutes dedicated to real life trebuchets, like just like straight up for Age of Empires.
Yeah, it was so bizarre because it was like, this is interesting, but like,
why?
This is a History Channel thing that I would watch like on my like, I don't know why you're doing this in the middle of a games thing, but yeah, no. So Destiny, like this is a very cool. This looks so neat to me. Like the story is ramping up, first off, which is like really exciting. The fact that there are Hive Guardians is insane, and that you could like reach out and like crush their fucking souls is awesome. That first person glaive weapon that's just like a glaive with a gun at the end of it is sick. It just looks fun. Like, it looks like they're having a great time making this thing. It looks like they're really passionate about it. It looks like they're adding all these like really cool features. I forgot to mention when I was talking about when I jumped into it earlier that crossplay is now a thing. So you can now jump between PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and it's all pretty seamless. Voice chat doesn't work cross-platform though. It's weird. That's kind of annoying. But, you know, I feel like it's at a point where like, I feel like it's building up to like really interesting things. They even announced like this chapter after Lightfall, which was already like presumably the last thing. It was like the final shape or something. I feel like there's just a lot of room to grow and a lot of really cool shit that's probably going to happen in this universe in the near future. And I'm super pumped about it. It looks really fun and it looks really cool. And the fact that like it's actually focused on story is also like really, really exciting, because they finally have like a lot of meat to build off of for that.
I see things like Destiny or World of Warcraft or whatever, League of Legends, just games that stay around for a while and have big audiences and are allowed to spread their wings and find, like you said, story and characters and ways to keep people engaged for many years at a time. And I'm always jealous because nothing I've ever loved has been given that opportunity. Like, nothing I've ever truly loved like that has ever been able to spread its really truly stay and spread and find a way. Like, all the series I bring up, like Mega Man and Castlevania, obviously those kind of just come and go and aren't taken very seriously. Things I love outside of games, like G.I. Joe, which is like a 40-year-old universe, is still like a very underground thing. It's exciting because I know how people who love these kinds of things must feel about it, because I know how I would feel if something that I really fell in love with at the beginning was just over and over again delivered. And it's exciting. Like, Bungie really has the world by the balls right now. And it's all through one game. It's interesting. Now they're making something else, right? Aren't they making like another game?
There's talk of a hero shooter codenamed Matter, which knowing Bungie, that's probably what the name is going to be, because they like to have these like singular names, like, you know, Marathon, Halo, Destiny. It seems that I would believe that. And to be quite fair, if Bungie did make a hero shooter, it might be the exception where I might actually play it.
Sure.
Because I can't stand most, like, I got into Overwatch for like maybe like a couple months, and I was like, it lost its luster pretty quickly for me. But Bungie does know how to make really satisfying gunplay and really satisfying movement work really well in tandem with each other. Even if it's not like, you're not moving around like Titanfall, and you're not like, you're not like Quake, or you're like flying across the field in like a second. But they know how to marry those things really well, and they're really good at shooters. Like, I think they're really the kings of like making like mechanically like really kind of perfectly tuned FPSs. And if they are working on that, that's cool. But I'm really happy that Destiny has this like long way forward, especially just for people who might be curious. And if they're like, hey, I missed out on a lot. Like, I wasn't really there for the first game. I wasn't there for like the first 7 years of this second game. I don't know if I want to jump in. If you do, there's at least like 4 more years of like stuff to look forward to. And I think that's important for a game like that. And it's important for a series like that. And it's important for that studio. But yeah, no, they're doing an incredible job. They've always been like one of my top developers. They've always made like really stellar stuff. And it's really gratifying also just to see a game that launched like, I wouldn't say it launched as catastrophically as like, the Master Chief Collection or No Man's Sky. But to see something that was kind of confused on launch and just kind of didn't know what it was, kind of find its cadence and deliver such rewarding story and gameplay, and just get to this point where people are excited still for new Destiny stuff, is like, it's just really nice to see. I'm really happy that, Bungie hasn't gone the route of like, Blizzard or other studios that, were once great and just have kind of petered off. It's amazing to me that they've remained as on top of their game as they have been for so long. It's crazy.
Pretty well managed too, because it seems like they understood over and over again where they should be at the right time. Being with Mac and Apple at that time, I didn't even know. I was reading about them yesterday. They made a Pippin game, which is fucking hysterical. Pippin was like the very obscure Apple console from 1995. And, and then they moved over to Microsoft at just the right time. And then they got out of there at just the right time. And then they were with Activision, and then they got out of that at just the right time. It was,
and ever since they left Activision, man, it's literally just been nothing but, there have been like minor complaints about like weapon balancing and like the overall sandbox. But like, dude, like ever since they left Activision, it's been nothing but like great shit. Like Shadowkeep was pretty good. Beyond Light was pretty good. This next thing looks really awesome. Like they're killing it. And ever since they left Activision, the seasonal model has made sense, which is crazy, because you think that like a publisher would incentivize a seasonal model more, just because it's like, hey, we got to get some, skins in there. But it's like, we're leaving and now we'll make the good game. it's crazy.
Yeah, it's fun. It is fun. It's an interesting thing to watch from the outside. I'm excited for Destiny fans. What do you make of it, Dustin, as let's say a more intermediate level player?
Yeah, I am excited. I actually really want to check out this new season because it deals on this specific location. What is it called again, Chris, that I really like? The Awoken.
Oh, the Dreaming City?
Dreaming City, which I always think is one of the absolute coolest locations that Destiny has made so far. So it's interesting. I'm curious to see what the really long-term plan is, because they've laid out this expansion, then the following, and the one after that. And that will conclude the Darkness and Light story, which, guys, let's be real. Kingdom Hearts and Destiny, we're both dealing with light and dark, and no one knows what the fuck they're talking about. It's more similar than you might think. And I stand by that. So I'm just curious whether at that point, are they going to continue to support Destiny only just with a new like phase 2 situation or like new overarching arc? Are they going to do like, okay, we're actually going to do a new Destiny game at this point, which I know people would be maybe not happy with because they want to maybe you could bring your character along. I don't know. But at the same time, they're developing a new game as well that Chris mentioned. And just there's a lot of possibilities forward for them. So it'll be interesting to see how, now that they're fully independent, how they decide to move forward.
We have a letter here from Trent Miller, who wrote in and said, "Greetings, master of all things Tech Collins, salutations, lover of JRPGs Chris, and good day, hater of anime Dustin. With the reveal of the next expansion in the Destiny 2 universe, they say they are putting a big emphasis on the campaign, saying, if you like single-player games like Doom, Halo, God of War, and others, then The Witch Queen is for you. So will this be the first time you finally give Destiny 2 a try, Colin? I'm also curious about Dustin and Chris's take on the reveal." Well, we already talked about that. I don't think this is going to get me in, although I did see that. Chris, what do you think they mean by this nod to single player games? Are they trying to get people like me that are on the edge to give them a go? Because they've never really talked about their game as a single player game, even though it can be played that way. Other companies go out of their way to note that, including games that I really love, like Outriders and The Division. I'm wondering if they just maybe see that they're leaving people on the field that they can get.
Maybe. I definitely think it's really weird. It's hard for me to talk about this because I actually know what's going on in this story because I pay attention to all these like weird like little like lore entries that are like there's a lot of stories that are like etched into the descriptions of guns, and it's like that's kind of, and like weapon pieces and like armor pieces, and it's like that's kind of how like you're meant to. It's almost Dark Souls-esque in a way where you're kind of meant to piece the story together. But there's also like there's ever since they left Activision, there's been more of a consistent effort to kind of tell cohesive stories through actual in-game dialogue and through like, cutscenes. And I have to imagine that what they mean by this is that there's going to be a healthy amount of cutscenes and there's going to be a lot of story meat to sink your teeth into if you're not somebody who prefers to dig into like deep lore, or you don't want to have to rely on some YouTuber reading the lore to you, which I did for a long time. My Name is Bife was like a channel that I watched a lot because he summarized so much of the story really well. He has a great voice, and it's just like the best way to get that content. But I would imagine that there's just probably more of a focus on story. You could have played a lot of these single player, a lot of the previous Destiny expansions single player as well, and you didn't necessarily need people to understand what was going on. But I have to imagine this just means like there's more of a focus on maybe set pieces and like, proper cutscene and implementation and all this sorts of stuff. I'm curious though, like how they plan on delivering that, because the last time they did say this, granted, it was a very different Bungie, very different time, was before Destiny 1 came out, where like, if you like Halo, you'll like Destiny. And it's like, not exactly. That story was not finished at all. So granted, this does seem like to be, this seems like a far more healthy and capable Bungie than, 2013, 2014, figuring out what this thing was, so.
Dinklebot. That's all I remember from the original
get
Destiny. I did play the original for a little while. Good old Dinklebot.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that. That's February 22nd next year.
Yep.
Number 5. It should come as no surprise at this point, but the game Wild is officially no more. Indeed, we reported on this back in 2020, but further confirmation has been made as to the game's destruction. Word comes by way of website Video Game Chronicle, which reports on Scuttlebutt from the Giant Bomb podcast that the game is finished. What we knew as of last year was that the game's creative director, the sometimes controversial Michel Ancel, had retired from the industry, leaving the game in limbo. This seems to confirm that the entire team has moved on, though apparently they remain together. The team is called Wild Sheep, and you may note that their game was revealed at Gamescom in 2014. The promise was to deliver an open-world game populated by enormous numbers of animals, which players can then take control of. Planned as a second-party PS4 exclusive, in other words, a game funded by Sony from a studio it doesn't own. Wild hasn't been seen publicly in 6 years. And Michel Ancel, who was best known for his longtime work at Ubisoft, where he created the Rayman franchise and acted as the franchise's steward, has also seemingly abandoned his work on Beyond Good and Evil 2 as well, though that game apparently remains in production at Ubisoft. The original Beyond Good and Evil, which he directed and wrote, launched on PS2 in 2003, was long rumored to get a sequel, which Ubisoft later confirmed and properly announced. Dustin, what do you make of this? Do you remember this announcement? I was at Gamescom when this game was announced, and I remember just being like, oh, okay, it's like another second-party game. And then we saw a little bit at it. Remember when Sony would have a presence at Paris Games Week, they showed it again. So that was 2015, and then we never saw it again, and they never properly canceled it. And this happens sometimes with second-party Sony games. Sometimes they find their way to other publishers. Remember Me is an example of that. Sometimes they just disappear entirely. But I'm wondering what you think of this ambitious idea going away. And Michel Ancel's kind of fall from grace as he never delivered the games he promised towards the end as he just left.
Right. I mean, look at Beyond Good and Evil 2 right now. Like, what happened to that? Apparently, I'm looking at this, like a Wikipedia article about Beyond Good and Evil 2. Apparently, he hasn't been directly involved for some time with Beyond Good and Evil 2. But yeah, this game can, Wild, can join the ranks of Agent, which, you know, the Rockstar exclusive game that for PS3 that just disappeared and never happened. Who knows? Maybe one day, what if Sony just comes out and is like, hey, Agent, we're doing it. Rockstar.
That would be awesome. People expected that for a little. People did expect that for a little while, like in the preceding years, because there were a few games from that era, not only Rockstar, but some Sony internal games that just disappeared. We talk about the Getaway 3 sometimes, but also there was a game, I think it was called like Six Nights. I don't know if you guys remember that game. It was something like that. And that game like totally disappeared. So there are a lot of games from that mid-aughts era.
Was that the one with the trailer in like the desert or something? What the hell was that desert trailer one?
I don't know.
That might have actually been Agent. Now I'm thinking about it.
But yeah, one of them I think was just like a logo and stuff. But anyway, I interrupted you. Go on, Dustin.
I'm trying to think. There's another game from early in PS4 that also disappeared. Is that Deep Down?
Right? Oh yeah, Deep Down. Yeah.
No, yeah.
I actually played Deep Down.
Yeah.
Which is funny. Yeah, that game, that was a Capcom game that just totally disappeared.
Yeah. So yeah, this is unfortunate. I mean, for me, I never thought that it's been so many years since I've seen the trailers, but I remember thinking like, okay, looks neat. I guess like there was never enough that I was like, man, I'm really excited for Wild. So to me, it's okay that it's gone. It's sad. I mean, not sad. Apparently, I don't know. This dude, didn't he have a lot of allegations against him? I don't know whether they're proven or not.
I don't know much about the allegations against Michel Ancel, to be honest. I just know that he so I want to speak to that, but I just know that he has kind of just not delivered. I mean, this is the man that made he made Rayman. It's pretty big deal. He had a really long running relationship with Ubisoft. I don't think the company would be what it was without him. So it's just interesting that this has gone this way for him.
Right. Yeah. It's weird to see someone kind of just fade away like this from the industry. I guess it's not weird. It probably happens regularly, but someone who, like you said, created Rayman, that's a pretty big deal.
I agree. What do you think of this, Chris? Do you have any love for Michel Ancel? I mean, I don't know if you have any love for Wild specifically, a pretty obscure game, but you know, he's put out a lot there. I don't know if you're a Beyond Good and Evil fan. I like Beyond Good and Evil. I played it on Xbox actually when it came out, and I just never understood why people were so desperate for another one. Like, it was cool, but I was like, this is fine. Why do you want another? And now we're so detached from it. They might as well just reboot or just Beyond Good and Evil. Just call it Beyond Good and Evil. Not even put.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I liked what little of Beyond Good and Evil I played, and honestly, like the gameplay that they showed a couple of years ago when they actually showed it running did look pretty cool. Like, I actually remember thinking like that. Actually, I would play that. I think that looks kind of neat. But outside of Rayman, Rayman's really the thing that I loved Rayman on the PS1, and even I mean, not necessarily him specifically. I don't know if he had anything to do with Legends. Did he have anything to do with Legends specifically?
I think.
Or is he just the creator of Rayman?
No, I think he was the creative director of Legends.
Well, that was amazing. So that's probably as much as I know about him and his stuff. It's kind of a shame that like he just has all these weird things in like development hell, because you'd think that wouldn't be the case.
Yeah, you would think that he would. He just seems like a guy that might need a producer. But
you
think that they would have
probably just
found
bad
that
at organizing or something,
right? You think they would have found that with Sony?
I don't know.
Wild.
I don't know if I have much to say about it. Like, I don't necessarily care that Wild never looked interesting to me. Beyond Good and Evil, I hope comes out. But I don't know. What we need is whenever a game gets canceled like this, we need or canceled or like left into development hell. I feel like we need to go into the past and take one of those games that like was done but never released and just like put them out, like Thrill Kill.
Yeah,
you know?
Thrill Kill.
Like, put that out now.
That would be awesome.
See, it was like, sorry, we couldn't do Wild. Here's a Thrill Kill remaster.
We had a build of Thrill Kill, a final build of Thrill Kill at IGN, which was awesome. You can only play it on a PS1 dev kit, but
that's hilarious.
Yeah, we had it. It was kind of cool. All right, let's see here. Number 6, and a move both surprising and wise. Take-Two Interactive and its 2K Sports imprint have decided to delay the launch of its annualized wrestling game, this time called WWE 2K22, until March of next year. As noted by website Polygon, this represents a nearly half-year delay and is likely buying essential time for Visual Concepts to better wrap their minds around the property. Visual Concepts, you may know, is the 2K-owned team known for its beloved and peerless NBA series, NBA 2K. However, it also long worked alongside Japanese developer Yuke's on the WWE franchise in a support role. For reasons not entirely known, though almost certainly revolving around money and licensing, Yuke's was removed from the lead development role of WWE, starting with WWE 2K20, which launched in the fall of 2019 and completely bombed critically, dropping some 35 points on Metacritic between years. As such, WWE 2K21 was completely canceled, and now the delay will buy even more critical time. As for Yuke's, which started making wrestling games for WWF and later WWE in 2000, they are continuing their development of an all-elite wrestling or AEW game, which is becoming a more viable competitor to WWE. Dustin, what do you think of this? They really fucking... I want to know more, and I don't know if it is known. I couldn't find much information about it. What happened here? Because they had like a very good studio making an annualized game for them. And then they walked away. They tried to bring it to Visual Concepts, probably because it was cheaper. They don't own Yuke's, they own Visual Concepts. Visual Concepts could not do it. They dropped 40 points on Metacritic the next year. Then they canceled the game after that. And then they delay the game after that by 6 months. This reminds me a lot of EA's NBA Elite series, which like just kind of sometimes comes out and sometimes doesn't, and is like always pretty bad. It's a pretty catastrophic thing. And what I thought was interesting was Yuke's is now making an AEW game, which is like a complete punch in the face, because I'm not a wrestling fan, but as I understand, AEW is kind of like coming up, right? Like they just get some prolific wrestlers in there, and like I think CM Punk and I think they were teasing Daniel Bryan coming back, who I only know because of the yes 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 thing he does is an Islanders chant too. What do you think? What do you think happened here? God, I would like to know more about that. I don't even care about the games themselves.
Right. Well, it is interesting because I remember hearing about this, I don't know, conflict, this back and forth about these WWE games. And I'm looking at Yuke's releases since which they've put out a ton of stuff since their first release in 1995. Most recently in 2019, they put out an Earth Defense Force game, Iron Rain,
which is not their series, so they were just working on that. Yeah.
No, from 2013 to 2018, they had only released WWE games.
Right.
In 2013, there was a Pacific Rim game that was in there, apparently. So this is interesting to see them, kind of flip sides. I feel like overall, let me know what you think about this, Colin. I feel like the sports game industry right now, it's constantly changing. We see this like moved, like it's almost like they haven't adapted fully to this new online ecosystem of like, we see games that like take years off, games that finish and then never actually come out. And it just it's interesting to see how these different publishers compete in this space and how some of them just fail spectacularly to the point where a game is ready, and maybe even, I don't know, was any of these games actually pressed and ready to go and then not released?
We had a copy.
One of them was.
NBA Elite 11, I want to say, we had at IGN pressed, and there were like trophies live and achievements live, and they just never released it. I mean, imagine how bad a game must be for them to be like, it is better for us to just not release this gold game that we are done with. That's totally done.
Right.
That's pretty, but I remember us getting a build of that because then they were like, oh, we had like an embargo, and then they were like, there is no review embargo because the game's not coming out. And we're like, but we have it right here. It's like literally in a box right here.
It's insane.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see what happens here. again, I'm not a wrestling person, but I am intrigued by this AEW thing because I think they're kind of like starting to be viable. Do you know anything about this, Chris? About the AEW and the WWE stuff?
So little. This is the first time even hearing of AEW.
Yeah,
Like,
I didn't know that.
what the
I
hell
didn't
is
know
this?
that it meant all elite wrestling, but I don't know anything about CM Punk, but I saw him, like, people were freaking out. And so it's just interesting that Ukes goes with the competitor to this. It suggests to me that maybe not all is well between 2K and them. Maybe a theory could be 2K tried to buy them perhaps, and they got rebuffed. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe the story is better known to people in that circle, but you're right, Dustin. The sports ecosystem is so fascinating because look at what's happening. Look at what happened recently with EA, right? Outbidding Take-Two to get Codemasters so they can sports annualize racing games. Meanwhile, Take-Two goes all in and buys a golf team, gets the Tiger Woods IP, which used to be EA's. Now they're going to release Tiger Woods PGA games. But EA now is going to release its own non-Tiger Woods golf game for the first time, ever, since, they did a Rory McIlroy one, I think, for a little while. But so you're right. It is interesting. Meanwhile, NBA 2K is doing really well. EA's trying to get back in, but is having a hard time doing that. Baseball is still just cleared for the show. FIFA and eFootball, right? Now we're going to be competing, and they're going to get a third competitor, which we're going to talk about in the wrap up. We should do a show. Well, I'll do it. I won't torture you guys, but I'll do it with someone else, all about sports, like sports games. Because you're absolutely right. It's just such a dynamic space. And I must say, I am pulling for the underdogs here. Like an AEW game, I hope it's awesome. Like eFootball, I hope it kills FIFA. It won't, but I would love for that kind of upheaval. I would love for a new NHL game to come out. And dare I say, I would even love for a baseball competitor to come out as well. Okay. Let's move on here to number 7. It's not exactly clear what's taking so long, but Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga was again shown off, this time at Gamescom, still lacking a date. However, the game still looks awesome and does have some sort of timing tease. It'll come to both PS4 and PS5 at some point in the spring of 2022, and mark developers Traveler Tales' first foray back into Star Wars since way back in 2011, as its sister developer TT Fusion developed the Lego Star Wars Force Awakens tie-in that launched on PS3, PS4, and Vita in 2016. The Skywalker Saga will be TT Games' first release since 2019's Lego Movie 2 video game on PS4, and has seemingly suffered mightily under the strain of COVID. When announced in early 2020, the game was slated for a launch in October of 2020. Bouncing it to the spring of 2022 amounts to a 1.5-year delay, though the game will ambitiously attempt to cover all 9 movies in the so-called Skywalker Saga from Episode 1 through Episode 9, with 45 levels and more than 300 playable characters. The first Lego Star Wars game came to PS2 all the way back in 2005. I don't know if you guys have anything to say about this. I doubt you do, but I just want to say I'm excited about this. I'm like really looking forward to this game. I like Lego Star Wars, and I haven't really sat down and played a Lego Star Wars game. I had the Complete Saga, I think, on Wii, and it was really fun there. I played a few of them on Vita, like the Lego Batman shit, but I like Lego games. They're really easy. They're very playable. And they're fun, and I'm really intrigued to see how they deal with the 9 Star Wars movies. 9 divided by, it would be 5 stages, 9 times 5, 45. So then we have 300 characters, which is awesome. Like, who are they going to be? How are they going to play?
If it's not Max Rebo, return the game.
Return the
game.
You want to play as Max Rebo?
I want to be able to. Can I play every level of this game as Max Rebo?
I bet you can. That would be awesome. Talented piano. Max Rebo is the piano player in Jabba's palace.
He's the blue guy
of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Why do you guys know this?
Because he's awesome.
Because first I was a massive Star Wars fan when I was a kid. I can name all of those characters, but yeah. So he's like the blue elephant looking guy. That's like he's like on this keyboard.
Yeah. He's great.
I'm going to say that there is a decent chance that Max Rebo will be a playable character. When you're talking about 300 characters. I mean,
I'm looking.
Max Rebo.
I'm just looking to see if he's in one of the old games. Maybe that's the key, the ticket.
How about his singer, Cy Snoodles?
Oh,
who's the
I can't even criticize.
Or Droopy McCool.
who's the other
Oh,
player.
Droopy McCool.
Yeah, he's like the
Whoa.
That's a terrible name.
Droopy McCool. I was
it's
so
awesome.
excited because they late in my Star Wars collecting, they released the band finally, like from Jabba's palace, and I was amped up. Yeah, Max Rebo and his fucking little piano, like because he plays in that circular piano. That's like he's all
Yes, it's like Zorak. So Max Rebo is a character that is playable in Lego Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
Oh, interesting.
Which is odd. I'm looking at his ability list, and it literally just all says no.
No,
It's like lightsaber, no. Grappling hook, no.
Like, he's probably like just a useless little.
He probably
That's
doesn't
so
do anything.
funny, man. So yeah, I would. So the answer's got to be yes then. But that's what I'm excited to see. Like I would love to play as all these random characters. It would be fun. I would play as Lobot. That'd be dope. All right, I'm gonna get out of here before move on before Chris loses it. Number 8, the newest King of Fighters game, the King of Fighters 15, finally has a release date. It will launch on both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 on February 17th, early next year. The core game will include 39 playable characters to start and will include both local and online play. The last King of Fighters game, 14, came out back in 2016 on PS4, and before that, 13 launched in 2010 on PS3. Before that, it was typical to get at least one King of Fighters game a year, and sometimes two, as publisher and developer SNK at one time wisely annualized the franchise like it were a sports game. Interestingly, the aforementioned Koch Media is acting as this game's worldwide publisher, and obviously the game is still developed internally at SNK, an old and storied Japanese company that has in more recent times come under scrutiny for its economic relationship with the Saudi royal family. As for King of Fighters, it began in arcades in the Neo Geo console way back in 1994 and is actually one of, if not the first ever, crossover fighter. I was thinking about that. The first King of Fighters game, first of all, is called the King of Fighters 94. And so they were kind of ahead of their time because they annualized them like a sports game, which was cool. But King of Fighters is a crossover game, and I totally forgot about that. And I was thinking, like, is it the first crossover fighter? It might be, because it's like Art of Fighting, Fatal Fury, Akari Warriors, Psycho Soldier, like all of these kind of obscure things. But it is a crossover. I'm sorry?
So the first one was 94,
1994.
Right? When was the first Marvel vs. Capcom? Probably like 98?
Yeah, I would say 96, 97, maybe. NBC Wiki. Yeah, 90. Oh, no, X-Men versus Street Fighter, 96. And then Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter is 97. And then Marvel versus Capcom is 98. Yeah.
Yeah, so it must be, that's kind of crazy. Because I was going to say, like, Marvel vs. Capcom is the only one that I could think of from that time.
Street Fighter Alpha is also a crossover fighter, technically, because there are, but I don't think that's even later. I think I want to say that's 96 or 97 too. So yeah, interesting. I was just thinking about that. King of Fighters is like a pretty beloved, although low key franchise. And
95 Street Fighter Alpha.
Yeah, so close, very close.
Yeah,
because there are some characters from different franchises in that game, like Cody, I think, is in that, and others. So that would be technically a crossover fighter. But anyway, just wanted to give a shout out for the fighting game community, as I know you're looking for games. And finally, number 9 is a wrap up. Website Gamatsu reports multiplayer firefighter game Ember comes to PS4 on September 23rd. Brawler Asterisk and Obelix Slap Them All comes to PlayStation 4 on November 25th. Exploration and crafting game The Wild at Heart comes to PS4 at the end of 2021. Action fighting game Sifu, which a lot of people are excited about, comes to PS4 and PS5 on February 22nd. 3D action game XEL comes to PlayStation 5 in the second quarter of 2022. Indonesian developed 3D action platformer Project Buramato comes to PS4 and PS5 in late 2022. Management game Park Beyond comes to PS5 at some point in 2022. And as promised, free-to-play soccer game UFL comes to PS4 and PS5 at an undetermined point in the future. So there's going to be another free-to-play soccer game in addition to eFootball. The website also reports that Alfred Hitchcock-inspired adventure game Vertigo, slated for both PS4 and PS5, has been delayed and will now come out in 2022. Website Push Square reports exploration game The Tourist comes to PS4 on September 9th. PS4 survival RPG Wasteland 3 is getting its final piece of DLC, Cult of the Holy Detonation, on October 5th. Eerie exploration game Jet the Far Shore, which looks great, comes to both PS4 and PS5 on October 5th. Strategy game Jurassic World Evolution 2 comes to PS4 and PS5 on November 9th. Isometric Brawler Midnight Fight Club comes to PS4 in the summer of 2022. Arcadish side-scroller Valfaris Mecha Therian comes to both PS4 and PS5 in late 2022. And interestingly, grand strategy game Crusader Kings 3 from Paradox is coming to PlayStation 5 at an unknown point in the future. I thought that was interesting because there is no PS4 launch. Now, what I'm really hoping for is mouse and keyboard support.
because I would love to play a grand strategy game. That would be really fun. That's like way above what a strategy game I've ever played. I don't think I've ever played a Paradox game. So,
Yeah.
all right, boys. That's all the news. Tradition dictates on Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, that we end every episode with 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from the audience. Remember to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, early ad-free access, Sacred Symbols, plus the ability to submit your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas, name in the credits, etc., and so on. Let's start with Kevin Harris. Hi, losers. If you had to guess, what would you say the first special edition PS5 SKU would be? Meaning the case is a different color or design, God of War or Horizon possibly, or would you say supply is too tight to consider alternate SKUs at this point? You're welcome. Thank you for writing in, Kevin. So I could be wrong about this, and I'd have to go back and look, but was the first redesign of PS4 the 20th anniversary PS4? Because that was a little longer than a year later. And there were no games that would have come out in between that would have gotten a special edition, except maybe Call of Duty.
I don't know.
So I don't know that. So I'm only saying that because it might just be too early to even consider this question. But by the time Horizon comes out, it will have been over a year. Chris, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I actually don't think it's too early to consider that because, like, I mean, this happened at Gamescom. I was gonna say XCOM because we're talking about XCOM earlier. At Gamescom 2, where Halo Infinite got a specific Xbox Series X SKU, like a custom, like limited edition, like designed console. So I think we're at that point where, like, clearly they have, at least Microsoft does, they have access to enough materials that they can afford to make, you know, limited edition, like special edition SKUs. I would imagine that Sony's in a similar position. It's just they don't have any games that are coming out in the fall yet. So I would, if I had to bet, I think it's a safe bet to assume that Horizon would probably be the first one to have a SKU like this. Purely just based on timing. Like if Halo Infinite can get one in November, then surely by February Sony can get one for Horizon. Like that seems to make sense. But I don't know. Like it's hard to say what Sony's situation is as far as like parts go, because they did revise the PS5 recently,
right?
So those have been appearing. So like I don't know it's hard to say. I would bet Horizon though. Seems safe.
I feel like you could be right, but Dustin, I wonder what you think about my theory that doing a special edition consoles in a time of scarcity is going to be a bad move, because people are going to be extra mad that they can't get the console, and then there's going to be special editions that are going to cause a ton of crush on a supply chain that is already being crushed. And I just feel like it's not a good idea. You know, like I just think you got to keep selling these white ones until these unfortunate vagina looking consoles, until you come out at the other end and you are like, okay, people can comfortably find one, and now we do the special editions. I understand what Chris is saying. I just get a little nervous that
I don't think people would be angry. Like people don't seem to be up in arms about the Xbox, and that's just as, you know, like they face a similar problem.
Yeah, that's a good point.
As far as like, you know, people are like, oh, cool. You know, I don't think people really care that much as long as they can like get their hands on one, even if they can't.
Is there as much anger with Xbox fans as there are PlayStation fans right now, though? I just feel like I'm not well connected to that ecosystem, but it just feels like there's so much anger in the PlayStation ecosystem right now, you know, because people just can't find this fucking thing. And I just feel like people can't find Xbox, but I feel like, frankly, there are just fewer people looking for them too. I just feel, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally off base. What do you think, Dustin?
I think that the Series X is still selling out. I think that it is easier to get them than PS5s still overall. But again, they still sell out. They're still selling very well. I think that it might be better. I think I'm with Colin that it could go either. I can go either way. I could see them being like, well, here, we want to do this. It's special. It's for the hardcore Horizon fans or whatever. Here it is. But again, I could see people being like, wow, you're already doing special editions when people don't even have a chance to get the regular one yet. But again, that
it opens up a potential headache for them. They don't need demand right now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Maybe by the time, let's say God of War comes out, I don't know, mid to late next year, maybe by that time I could see, especially because they did a God of War PS4 Pro. So that might be something nice to do.
I see where you're coming from as far as like the headache that it would cause, but Sony doesn't seem to be that averse to headaches in the first place.
That's true.
Like they seem to be pretty totally fine with like, hey, we're shutting PlayStation Network down on the PS3 and Vita. Oh, whoops. Whatever. Just JK. They don't seem to be that considerate over like, I mean, quite frankly, I don't think they really care that much about like how people feel about PlayStation. They just like want people buying them, and people are. And if I could see them very easily, like with Horizon being like, hey, here's what's the difference really between these consoles? Like you got to imagine that like, oh, maybe the white part is like painted differently. Like it's not like it's gonna be harder to make them.
Sure, I don't think it'll be harder to make. I don't know. I just think I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but here's an idea. Maybe instead of a new console, they just release new wings that you can pop on and off.
Yeah. That seems, I don't know, the way that they pop off. Like I thought that was going to be something that they were going to pursue, a little bit more. Like it hasn't been that long, I guess, since PS5's come out, but it's been long enough that I would have assumed like by now you would have like kind of officially licensed like custom PS5 like plating that you could like kind of swap, kind of like the Xbox 360 faceplates that you could like you could pop right into place. I think that'd be cool. That'd be fun.
They were suing people that were selling their own. So, I mean, maybe that's just being protective, but at the same time, it's like maybe they're thinking about doing that, and that could kind of be a happy medium.
Yeah,
we'll see. Thank you for writing in, Kevin, and thanks for calling us losers. Cedric S wrote in and said, "Hey, y'all. I got to ask a question that I'd love to hear your opinion on. Why are so many game protagonists white? Is there any reason why Nathan Drake or Aloy or Joel or even Ellie couldn't be black or Hispanic? Sure, people make games based on what they're familiar with, but there's nothing saying that those characters have to be white. It's not like we black people are rare or something. Hell, Sucker Punch made a whole-ass AAA game that takes place in 13th century Japan. I know Colin is working on a game starring a black protagonist, and Pedro Pascal, a Chilean-American actor, is playing Joel in HBO's The Last of Us miniseries, so diversity is coming, but why are there still so many white protagonists in video games? Thanks for everything you do." Chris, I'm curious what you think about this. I mean, I know you're a person of color. I know that as a Puerto Rican, you're in this weird space. I understand that because I've had my best friend's Puerto Rican, and I understand this weird space that you dwell in. You're a very Americanized Hispanic.
We're the chameleon people.
Right.
We're like I'm a POC when it's convenient, and I'm white when it's convenient. I think it's largely accepted that like you can be Puerto Rican and white.
Yeah, sure.
Like that's just kind of like I think that's what
I am.
Well,
just like there are a lot of white Brazilians and a lot of white, like straight up white Brazilians, white Argentinians, etc. I wonder where they came from.
Puerto Rican's not a race; it's just a place. It's like I'm Hispanic,
Germany,
but yeah, like I don't know, like I think there's just a heritage in general in America of just like action. Like we're framed largely by the media that we see. So like, I think, there's a lot of action movies. We have a lot of history of action movies with like, straight white male leads. And, that's just sort of that trickles into what a lot of people believe is very marketable and very easy and very safe. I think it is a very safe thing. It's like, here's Nathan Drake. And it's like, fine, it's whatever.
Yeah, Nathan Drake's great, but very vanilla when you think about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of it. I think there's like a safety and like a familiarity. It's like everybody knows this person, like so. Like I feel like that's part of it. I think it's like a marketability thing, is like as kind of weird and off-putting as that is. But I do think I don't know. Like I feel like this argument is a bit overdone, only because I feel like there are so many video games now, more than ever before, that are a little bit more like we just had Miles Morales, which I actually like made a point to say like this is like literally the first time I've ever seen Puerto Rico represented in a video game, like ever. Like I can't think of one in my extensive backlog that I've played that I've seen that much representation, and that was cool. And we've had like non-white protagonists as well, and we've also had. I feel like most games now are in this weird space where you don't have default protagonists, where you kind of make your protagonists. Things like the biggest games that I can think of, like games like Skyrim, or like even GTA 5 with like its 3 protagonists. which are all very different. I don't know. Like, I think when we boil it down to, and I guess he's talking about in the Sony space, which is like, I guess that's a fair criticism, I suppose.
There are very
That
few.
is-
I mean, yeah, with the exception of Starhawk and, like you said, obviously Ghost of Tsushima, there isn't much.
Yeah. And I think, when there is a good idea present, which there's no reason why there shouldn't be. Like, I do think that's something that they maybe should consider. I do think, though, like Miles Morales is in the PlayStation ecosystem, and it is an example of something that is a little bit more in the vein of what you're trying to, pitch here. I just think, I don't know. I'm not bothered by it necessarily. I understand what you're saying. It was very cool to see Miles Morales, and it's very cool to see that. And I think more of that leads to more interesting stories and just like a better industry in general. But at the same time, I don't know if you can really kind of mandate that. I think you kind of have to maybe just hope that a studio comes with a pitch that's good and also happens to have this going for it, and then Sony jumps on it. Like, I don't know how to solve this problem without being overly mandatory about it. Like, I wouldn't want to see a place like a notice go out from PlayStation HQ being like, we are no longer accepting games with white protagonists. Like, that'd be weird to me.
Right.
Like, I would feel uncomfortable with that. I don't know. It's a complicated thing,
Yeah.
but I do think it's something that's being alleviated in the greater industry. Maybe not so much in PlayStation ecosystem, which is like fair, but I think we're getting there, and it'll be a little while, but I
think it cuts both ways in the sense that
isn't Deathloop also like, isn't he a black protagonist? Am I wrong?
But that's second party. I think you're right.
True,
But
yeah.
I wonder, because it cuts both ways in the sense that Sucker Punch was kind of also criticized for making a game with all Japanese people when they're not Japanese, even though they were like, that game's like beloved apparently in the Japanese market. I don't know if this is offensive or not. I certainly don't mean it to be. I don't think it would be offensive, but I kind of consider Kratos a black character. I mean, he is played by black people in the games, whether it's, Terrence Carson back in the day, more recently it's Christopher Judge. I think he has a black presentation in some way. And so that's like a little bit of an interesting taste. But even then, he's a deified madman of a character. You wouldn't really know him in that sense. But I did want to point that out, that like, well, because someone's going to write in about that. Kratos is played and voiced exclusively by black men. So there's that, I guess. But Dustin, how do you feel about this question?
I think that we're seeing a lot of progress in this front. We're seeing a lot more diversity overall. I mean, it just takes time, in that a lot of these franchises are decades or at least a decade old in some instances. And we've seen, like, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy is a good example of a game that highlighted to not just women or people of color, but to women, particularly with Chloe and Nadine being the stars of that game. But yeah, I'm with Chris in that you don't want to like mandate it. Like, you got to let writers write what they want to write. Like, we can't be putting limits on that. But we also do want to see more diversity, because it does, at least I think in this instance, does create a lot of interesting stories that we've never heard before, or backgrounds that we've never seen. It can get boring when you have a guy like Nathan Drake over and over and over again. So I think that we're headed in the right direction, even if it's not fully there yet.
Yeah, very well said. And I think that, to your point, it's what is in demand of the art. And he had brought up in his letter that in the role-playing game I'm writing, that there's several protagonists because it's a party, but I saw a black man in my mind, and I saw a white girl, like a white teenage girl, and an older black guy. And how they interact and how they meet and all that, it's not important right now. It'll be important when you play the game in the years to come, but that's just what I saw. It wasn't anything more or less than that. So I don't know I'm not one of these people that believes in diversity for diversity's sake. I think we stumble upon diversity by keeping our minds open, right? Like, we got, I brought up in the past, we got Lord Cognito, and we got Cog to do our show Defining Duke, and we chose him because he's a great fit, but we chose a great fit that happened to be black, and so that adds that element, I guess, to it as well.
Yeah.
I know that's important to some people, but it's more important to me personally to keep what's in our minds diverse. I think what's coming to bear on our show, especially, and I think a lot of people are realizing it, is that like there's just a lot of diverse opinions and conversation on the show. And that comes more from like Chris and I kind of grew up in similar places, you know, like, but we're different in a lot of other ways. And so I don't know. I just don't want people to think about diversity only in that sense, but think about also what a person believes and feels. Well, like,
Right.
I think I've said it in the past, it's controversial to some people, but I have much more in common with the black people I went to school with on Long Island than a white person from fucking Austria. You know, I don't know. Like, well, just because he's white, we have a connection, right? Like, I have much more of a connection to the black dudes that I know.
That reminds me of that like weird Jason Schreier thing about like that studio that opened with all the the white guys, and it's like it's amazing that a studio looks like this in 2020. It's like, you don't know these people. Yeah. like just because it's wild that people think it's like, oh, you have a similar skin tone, so you have the same experience. That's not how that works, really. And I think anybody who's being really honest, and anybody in the real world understands that that's how that works. Sure. But on Twitter, that is how that works, and it's like a little bit frustrating. I don't know. Like, I do think diversity is important. I think it's cool, and I think it's a worthy thing to strive for. But at the same time, like, I just feel like this specific thing doesn't necessarily apply all that much now, only because so many of the biggest games now are games that where this just doesn't really apply. It's like there is no protagonist in Call of Duty Warzone. There is no Fortnite protagonist. The Destiny protagonist is whoever you create. You know, like it's a lot of these decisions are now like kind of player driven and kind of like, you know, who are you? And you get to choose that. Like even Skyrim and Fallout and the biggest RPGs that exist, and even just the biggest free-to-play shooters that exist. A lot of games don't even have characters per se. You know, a lot of them are, you know, Ratchet and Clank is animated, and you know, like things like Splitgate. Like, what even? Those are just random. That's not anybody. It's just they're just suits walking around. So, like, I don't know. I feel like we've got to. I understand the sentiment in story-based games. There should be a wider representation, but at the same time, the general public and the general audience that consumes games is in such a different environment now where that's not even a question now. Like, that's not even that can't even apply to something like Destiny or like Fortnite. Like, how are you gonna just skins, I guess, right? And there's already plenty of those.
It's true. This really is only relevant in narrative,
single player story stuff.
And I think Dustin made the point too, and I think you're right, Dustin, that this is just being solved elsewhere as well. But I wouldn't be surprised. We know that there are 25 games right in development in first party. I think that will include second party as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if I think half of them are new IP, they said. So I wouldn't be surprised if more than half of them, if not almost all of them, are not white men. Let's keep an eye on that, actually. Let's make note. Put a pin in it. All right. Ryan Goldner wrote into us and said, hey, boys, my question is in regards to remakes and remasters, and why do some people dislike them so much? I see them as a great way to bring an IP back to everyone's attention for a revival, or simply to make it playable again, but on a different note. I see it also as a way for developers to help develop the talents of the staff, particularly younger developers, to work with existing code and data. The biggest example of cultivating talent is Blue Point Games, who are now highly regarded. Wanted to know your thoughts on this idea, and if Sony would seek additional studios to build a relationship with and perhaps cultivate more talent like with Blue Point. Thanks for everything you do and for getting me through my days at the office. Thank you, Ryan, for your support and for writing in. Dustin, what do you make of this notion that maybe Sony needs to even invest more in remakes and remasters? I've really been all over the map in my career on this question because I wanted them and then it became too much, right? Like, it was really awesome. Like Sly, God of War, right? Team Ico, like these things started coming out, but then everything started, it just started, and then they started re-releasing, especially during the PS3, PS4 era. You got like Sleeping Dogs and like Sleeping Dogs Special Edition and all of this kind of crap. And I was like, it's too much. But now that we have these consoles that exist in perpetuity, I feel like it's a great time to bring as much forward as we possibly can. And that's my personal take. So I wouldn't mind seeing Sony invest in that. And they kind of have by acquiring Nix's. They've acquired a company that deals with porting. So that could be on their minds more. I don't know. What do you think?
I find it interesting that he said that why do some people dislike them so much? I don't. There's maybe some people that are like, whatever, I don't care. But are there people that actively hate remasters and remakes?
I think so. I think I'm not seeing them so much anymore, but it was a thing like a while ago. Yeah.
There was a moment in time, like I specifically remember around The Last of Us period, like when the first Last of Us came out, where there was like, here's The Last of Us, and then a year later it's like The Last of Us remastered, and it's like,
right,
come on, like let's just settle down here. Like I agree that's annoying because there's really no reason why that should exist, and it's just The Last of Us. Like, it's not remastered. You just made the game, like, and you put it out on a new thing. But I mean, we have, I think, like you said, like around the Team Eco like area where we got Metal Gear remastered and like all that stuff that like from older generations like brought forward. I think that shit's awesome. My favorite game of one of my favorite games of 2019 was the Crash Team Racing remaster.
Right.
Well, I don't think many people hate them, and Blue Point is so well regarded. Like it almost like the point that he brought up about Blue Point kind of negates the premise of the beginning of the question.
Right. Maybe the hatred towards remakes and remasters maybe that focus has shifted because now we're not seeing remakes of PS4 games or remasters of PS4 games to PS5. We're seeing $10 upgrade charges, director's cuts. So that's kind of replaced that. And now in our mindset, when we think of remasters and remakes, we think of Blue Point, where I think that, I feel like it's really hard to disagree with like thinking that what they did to Shadow of the Colossus and both Demon Souls remake is nothing short of incredible. Whether you like those games or not is a different story. But as far as a technical standpoint and how they were able to remake those games so faithfully while modernizing them in a lot of ways is really, really impressive work. So maybe there has been a shift in mindset. And also, Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I know that there's some debatability about the word remake in that case. We'll leave it at that. But I don't know. There's a fine line, I think, of what people are looking for. But I think it's good, Colin. You mentioned the idea of PS4 generation is the one moving forward where things live in perpetuity. It is time, I think, to get some of these games moved up. And I'll still stand by that. I want the PS5 to be able to play PS1 and PS2 games and really PS3 at some point. I would love that backwards compatibility. Let us buy Tomba 2. Let us buy whatever obscure PS1 game we want.
I think that was their ideal. I think that that's what they want. I just don't know if they can figure it out. They have all these patents to put trophies on old games. They have these patents for like dynamic store placement of old games. And I think they're just trying to figure it out. But I feel like, first of all, I to his question, should they invest in even more? I think that one more studio that can, because Blue Point's remaking games,
right?
Nix's is porting them. What you need maybe is a studio that's remastering the games, and that's a different thing entirely. Blue Point is too good for that now, right? Like, you don't want them to do that anymore. Like you said, look what they did with Demon Souls. It's a new game.
Yeah.
So I feel like in some sense, maybe finding another studio that can say like, we'll bring Infamous to PS4. And that's the big thing I want to say. I don't want the games to come to PS5. I want them to come to PS4 because, as Dustin said, and as I pointed out, that is the baseline moving forward forever. PS4 will work now, like moving forward for decades. Not your PS4, but you'll be able to go back and play those games. So just get everything to that base level and worry about anything else later. Resistance, Infamous, they've left behind like all this, the fucking, PS1 and PS2 Siphon Filter games, The Getaway. There's a lot of stuff that, like, Colony Wars, there's stuff that should come forward. And I know that with a guy like Jim Ryan in charge, we don't have a person that has an appreciation for older games, The Legend of Dragoon, Fib Ribbon, whatever the case might be. But I don't see why you wouldn't let the audience make that determination. Very similar to how Nintendo lets the audience make those determinations. Having a virtual console a la PS1 classics is not going to be good enough. They need to have a more integrative approach to get these games forward. And I think PS4 is the target. Anything that comes to PS5 alienates that entire mantra. So while we want next gen games on PS5, we want the baseline ports and remasters to be on PS4, I think. I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
Personally.
I agree.
All right. This next one from JJK, I really like what he has to say here. He says, "Sup, boys. Can or should games receive an M rating solely based on the inclusion of loot boxes? I'm not saying it's an easy fix-all solution, but this might make parents take more notice in their game in the games their kids are playing so they can protect themselves from future unwanted purchases if one were to arise. Is this legal? Why has no one mentioned this idea before? Seems straightforward. Kids aren't allowed to gamble in the US until they reach the age of 18 or 21. Loot boxes seem to be an apparent act of online gambling and therefore restricted for underage children. Thanks for all your work." This is an interesting idea. Dustin, what do you make of JJ's idea? Now, I do believe in-app purchases and all that kind of shit are on the box. I don't buy box games anymore, but I think it's all there. It's certainly there on the PSN. Now, that's one thing, but just saying like, listen, if you have in-app purchases, it's just M-rated. I don't know that would get major pushback. And the ESRB would really have to reframe what being M-rated means, but I don't mind it actually as a solution. What do you think?
Yeah. To me, it's on the box. Like I'm looking at this now from the ESRB where it says in-game purchases, parentheses, includes random items. And so if this is,
well, think about it this way, but wait, think about it this way. You're saying it's on the box, but it's very similar to PG-13. Like you don't remember when TV started rating stuff, then they started rating stuff and putting what it was. So it'd be like, this was rated 13. And then they would be like, oh, like it would have all those symbols. I think that's the difference between one thing and the other. What you're saying, like, it's on the box, but you don't know, but you don't really aren't reading it. If you just know it's R rated or M rated, then maybe it's not suitable for your child. You don't even have to know the reason why.
Right. I guess the question that this comes down to is that are loot boxes appropriate for children at all? Right? Like, I don't know. It just seems extreme to go mature. This comes back to the thing. It's like, parents, if your kids are young, you should know what games they're playing. If you care about the content they're consuming, and especially if they have willy-nilly access to the credit card on their account, which we've already talked about this over that, like, parents need to be involved in if their child has access to that type of thing. Like, to me, it seems like an extreme to take those games because some parents aren't going to even be, I don't know, maybe I'm making an argument for myself or against myself here by like some parents will just see M and not be informed and then just say, no, you're not playing that because they're not willing to do the research, which if you're an advocate against kids using any kind of loot boxes at all, then that's effective. But I don't know. It seems too extreme to me. I'm just always going to be in favor of like put the proper warnings and let people know, and parents need to take the responsibility to, if your kid has access to the credit card, which one other thing is people are talking about, well, is it okay for kids, even with permission, to have these gambling like mechanics in the game? I think that's something that maybe I'm not thinking about thoroughly enough. I don't know.
Well, I think you've effectively explained why it's probably not even possible. But I think in sharpening my own argument, I think my intent is to say, like, when I was a kid, first of all, when I was a kid, there were no ESRB ratings. ESRB ratings started when I was like 10 or 11. But when those things began, it never stopped me from playing those games. It almost never stopped me from buying them. I've said before, the only game I remember having a hard time buying was Grand Theft Auto 3 for some reason when it came out. And I just paid some dude outside to go buy it for me, and he did. So that was it. That was the only time I ever was stopped from buying anything. So while it does seem heavy-handed, if kids are going to circumnavigate it anyway, then it doesn't really matter. If it's just the final tick of a box that someone needs to protect their kid, in quotes, from these things, then it makes a little bit more sense to me. I agree with you generally that I'm just kind of laissez-faire, so it does kind of conflict with my own philosophy. But Chris, what do you make of this?
It should be rated AO.
Whoa.
I'm gonna go way harder than
you
both
wouldn't
of
even be able to
Fuck
sell
it.
your game on PlayStation anymore.
Yeah, I don't like them. I've already expressed extreme prejudice against loot boxes. Although to be fair, I don't think they're as big of a problem now as they used to be. I feel like a lot of publishers and developers have wisened up a little bit in the sense that they're seeing the government crackdowns happen with loot boxes in other countries, and they're like, you know what? Let's just have a storefront where you can buy things directly, and like microtransactions exist, but you know what you're getting. There's no like, ooh, I'm gonna spend $10 and maybe I'll get the thing I want. You just get a bunch of garbage, which is just like, I don't know. I just think it's like unethical from the developer's perspective, because you're just actively just ripping people off and making people pay for the chance of getting the thing that they want to pay for, instead of just offering the thing that is already in the game to them for a set amount of money that they would gladly pay anyway. I just hate that model, and I'm glad it's going away. So I think while this is like an interesting solution, like, yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with an M rating for in-app purchases. I just don't know if it necessarily matters now, because so much of what loot boxes were have evolved into the battle pass, or have evolved into just direct purchases where, like, you want this armor, here it is, download it, buy it. We don't want to deal with the government, which has already been like, I feel like that is already a solution in and of itself. I think literally just the threat of government intervention, much like with the ESRB in the first place, has always been a good motivator to just kind of do away with a lot of these, in my opinion, unethical, practices. And we're seeing that. Like, I can't think of a game currently that has loot boxes. I'm sure there are some. I think Overwatch might have some, but Overwatch has fallen off pretty hard, especially now. So I don't know. Every game that I play that has an online component, I don't really think has loot boxes. There's like engrams in Destiny that are kind of that way, but you don't pay for those. Those are just things that just kind of appear. Like, you just sort of like, oh, I picked this up, I wonder what's in it, for free. So I just don't know if it's even worth going through this solution in the first place, when it seems like the problem is more or less gone. And I would have to imagine that by the time Overwatch 2 comes out, or some of these other games that have legacies with loot boxes do arrive, I have to imagine that on some level those will be replaced by a similar system that we've seen in recent games, like battle passes, or like direct microtransaction purchases like you see in Fortnite and other games.
Very well said. I will say this, and we've all, I think, had this in our own childhoods, respectively, with whatever. You don't want to begrudge a child from spending their money, hard-earned money. They mow lawns or get an allowance or whatever, and then that's what they want to buy. And I've said before, I was an avid hockey card collector and stuff, and there were no digital options for me as a child, so who knows what I would have fallen into had there had been. So I can see both sides of the argument, of like the protective side and then kind of the more laissez-faire side. But it is interesting to just think about, to Dustin's point, kind of a child's freedom to play, right? And not be necessarily turned off to a game that is otherwise appropriate for them because of some overwrought rating from an agency, which, to Chris's point, was a great success and is a great success story of keeping the government out. I mean, the SRB is the answer of a threat and keeps the government away, which is not the case in other places. Remember, Australia like straight up bans games for speech somewhat often.
It's wild.
So we have a lot of different things that we have to balance with this question, and I really appreciated the thoughtful question, JJ, because it's not something I had ever really thought too carefully about. But I don't know. I think that there's another side of it, which is my I have 6 nieces and nephews, and my nephew Dash is a big gamer. And he loves Injustice, and he just wanted this like DLC pack that was like $10, I think, which was costumes and shit. And he just insisted he wanted it. And he doesn't have much money, right? Like, he gets his allowance or his like communion money or whatever. And then he bought it and it sucked. And he was like really upset. And it was a valuable lesson apparently to him to like not let money burn a hole in your pocket. So at the same time, not all children will just rampantly spend because they can as well.
That is true. Although he did know what he wasn't. It wasn't like you might get a costume if you buy this. What I mean? That's another thing. It's like there is a difference between like paying for the chance to. It's like buying a lottery ticket almost, as opposed to like, you know, buying something directly. Or it's like you're better off just buying something directly. But I don't know. Like I know that it doesn't necessarily apply to UConn because like who were you, like 11 when ESRB?
Yeah, I was 11. I think
So-
I was 11 years old. Yeah, 10 or 11.
So you'd conceivably have played or bought M-rated games
Definitely.
before, like. But Dustin and I are the same. Do you remember what the first M-rated game you bought was? Like actually, like legally, like as a newly 17-year-old person.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because I do remember getting carded at a GameStop once, like around that time. Maybe it was, GTA 5 came out when I was just out of high school. So that it might have been GTA 5. Isn't that crazy? GTA it's still going. But yeah, I remember getting carded. I don't remember specifically what. Maybe it was like Dishonored. That was a game that came out around that time too.
It's funny though because that is the legacy of Grand. Because I remember Grand Theft Auto 4 was the first game that I bought when I turned 17, and I was like, I'm going in. I'm going into the GameStop or whatever, and I'm gonna be like, I can buy this. And the guy's like, let me see your ID. It's like, no problem, sir.
That's right.
And I was so proud and happy. And then I got home and I didn't really like it that much. But
it's so funny, man. I remember very vividly buying beer legally for the first time, like, and how happy I was. I bought a rack of Natural Light, I think, and I just proudly, or Keystone, I think it actually was. And I walked just, you know, through campus with it, you know, kind of thinking I was like, cool, like, yeah, man, finally. Instead of like having like, you know, what we used to do is just get very conspicuously just fill up rolling luggage with fucking beer and liquor from the stores that would sell to us and then bring them back. And everyone knew what you were doing. It was quite weird that we were able to get away with that, but we did. All right. Dylan Bicka, I think I'm saying that right, wrote in and said, hi, CDC. I have a question regarding Sony's potential strategy and announcements. It's been almost a year since we had a proper PlayStation showcase, and I feel it's missed within the PlayStation community. I just feel the lack of a press conference or PSX has led to less excitement to the platform for the Sony faithful. The Xbox platform just seems more energetic, especially with its recent E3 showcase. It seems like Sony is more focused on smaller state of plays and focused gameplay reveals for exclusives, for example, Horizon. I can understand how a game like Horizon can bring more engagement having a separate reveal. However, it cannot replicate the excitement and pure hype of an E3-like showcase with many announcements. Do you think Sony is actually planning a showcase, or do you think they prefer focused gameplay reveals like Horizon and State of Play spread throughout the year? Will we see a separate State of Play exclusively for the next God of War? Thanks. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Dylan, for writing in. This is a good point. I do think that there is something missing, but until it hits them where it hurts, they don't really care. In fact, they're probably saying the less we do, the more we sell. I mean, that is actually what's being said right now. Just the market is saying that. We're doing less, the console's selling more. So they might look at it and say, like, there's no reason for us to invest in this sort of thing anymore. There's no reason for us to worry about this, date things, reveal things before they're ready, not have an understanding of the specific cadence of the catalog as we move forward through the years. And I think State of Play has been a very effective way for someone like me, of effective, because I don't like the pomp and circumstance of, you know, the pomp of Gamescom opening night. I didn't watch any of it. I just waited. I just kept F5ing every so often, push square just to see what was announced. And then I'm like, oh, they announced Saints Row, I'll just watch that. Oh, they announced this, I'll just watch that. And so when they come and just approach and say, like, we're going to really respect your time and just give you 15 minutes of Deathloop, or we're going to respect your time and just give you a half an hour of indies, I don't hate it. But there is something to be said about a big new shiny announcement, and we actually haven't gotten one in a while. That's why it's so weird that we're getting so close to just the final games that are even announced. Chris, what do you think of, or do you think we're missing something here, or would you like the return of a State of Play, an E3 return? What do you think?
I like the State of Plays when they focus on a game. Like, I like the Horizon State of Play. I like the Ghost of Tsushima State of Play. I like all of the focused State of Plays. But anytime they do a State of Play that's like, here's a bunch of stuff, it feels like a bootleg E3, and it doesn't feel nearly as interesting, nearly as exciting, and it's just not nearly as energizing. Like, for the most part, you know, I remember the Horizon 2, Forbidden West. State of Play was super positively received. Like, people really enjoyed it and really thought highly of the game after they saw it. And that's great. But if they're not doing that, the consensus online is usually like, all right. It's usually like very likely. So almost like, in my opinion, they need to do less in some ways and maybe more in other ways. I remember the big PS5 reveal event was awesome. You know, when they showed, and they ended it with, God of War, which was not real, but not a real date. But, like, that was fun. That was cool. That was like the closest thing we got to E3 in a long time. And, I do think there is something missing. But like you said, it doesn't really matter to them because they're doing well. They're spending less money on these shows than they would have had to if they had to like rent space out for, proper E3. That would have been just like a lot of money that they didn't need to spend because their stuff is selling well regardless. But I do agree in general, there is a little bit more energy over on the Xbox side right now. But that's just because they have more to talk about and they have more imminent things to talk about. And also, to be quite frank, the Xbox One was a fucking failure. It was a mess. So like, anything good that they do is going to seem way better than equivalently well done things that Sony does now, because they were already at the top and they kind of still are. Like, they could do identical things and it would matter way more for Xbox than it does for Sony. That's just the fact. So I think that also plays a key part in this as well.
What do you think, Dustin?
It's interesting. I made a tweet about this, how we see these opposite strategies of Sony and Microsoft, and in particular, this Xbox Gamescom stream, which they did set the expectations, saying these are going to be updates on our current I think it says titles coming this year. It was still like 90 minutes or 2 hours or something. It was just boring overall. I mean, I don't know how to say. I'm sure it was exciting for some people. In my opinion, I was pretty bored, and a lot of people were not into what Microsoft showed overall. In fact, they thought it was weird, which I think it makes sense now, that they didn't even have Halo at their own event. And that's like the whole reason everyone tuned in was for Halo, and then they ended up putting it on Keeley's thing. And so I think Sony knows the power of a really, really good event. Chris brought up the Future of Gaming show, and I'm just clicking through it now on YouTube and thinking back, like, this was a really, really solid presentation. We saw Miles Morales for the first time. We saw Ratchet and Clank, a lot of really promising indies. We saw Horizon, and at the end, the build up with the reveal of the console, it was really, I mean, in my opinion, like, masterfully done. Not that everything was amazing in this conference, but it really, really got people excited about this new machine. And so I could see Sony like, why do we need to talk multiple times a year? Why do we need to do Gamescom, Paris Games Week, and Tokyo Game Show? And we've already seen them kind of retreat away from talking multiple times a year. I'm still curious and wondering, though it's kind of getting a little late at this point, if they are going to do some type of PlayStation experience, whether that maybe is December or early next year. Maybe it's in person, maybe it's not, but I could see them being like, hey, we're going to lay out all the things that we're able to talk about right now, and it's going to be a really killer, 90-minute show, and this is what you can expect from us. And then we're going to go dark, other than these gameplay focused state of plays. I think that that's fun. When now with Microsoft, when you tune in, you don't know if it's going to be really worth watching, or like any of these other publishers. You don't know. Even sometimes when they do set the expectations, it can be worse than you expect. So, and I know that's a matter of opinion, but I am warming up to this strategy from Sony, even if it can be a little frustrating as a fan. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, very well said. I don't know that I disagree with much of what you guys have said. I think this has to be examined from really complex angles, marketing angles,
Yeah.
numeric angles, economic angles. Chris, were you going to say something? Or someone saying something?
No, I was just
Oh,
saying.
sorry.
I mean, I agree, but like, I do think it's just a matter of like who's implementing what strategy. I do think Microsoft needs to speak. I think they do. I think they have a lot to prove, and I think they have a lot to talk about in general over the next couple months. Psychonauts just came out, I think, the day we're recording this.
Very well received.
And that's
Very well received.
It's doing super well, way better than I thought it would.
Yeah, me
would
too.
do. So I'm really excited to play it when I get situated in New York. But like they've got obviously Halo in December, they got Forza in November, they've got like all these, they've got a lot to talk about, so they should talk about it. And Sony doesn't, so they should shut up, quite frankly, until they have something worth sharing. And I think that's when people are going to tune in. I think that's totally fine. I think both of these strategies are valid, and I think both of these strategies are appropriate given who it is that's implementing the strategies in the first place. So
yeah,
I think it's all
definitely good. It's exciting about gaming is just the different strategies that out of necessity need to be employed at the same time. And so you see different outcomes simultaneously where you don't really have to wonder what would have happened at X, Y, or Z time if these things were employed, because you just get to see them all deployed at the same time. And usually there's just one winner. Although people can win in different ways. And I think you're seeing that with Nintendo and Sony, and now Microsoft again. I think everyone's kind of winning. So in their own way.
Yeah. Well, they've always all been winning. Like they make millions upon millions of dollars every day.
That's true.
They're fine.
Although
Xbox
wasn't always a moneymaker for.
That's
them.
true.
In fact, it was quite the opposite. I think any company that withstood what the original Xbox lost would have not made another one.
Oh yeah.
So,
no, certainly. But they're also Microsoft,
right.
so they win by default, kind of by just being alive, like by being around still.
Indeed. The final question comes from Eliezer Morales, and I am curious because I don't really know the answer to your guys to the question for this one, and I think it just brings into focus kind of how bad this year has been for games, but maybe like one of the worst years for games. He says, "Hello, Sacred CDC. As we approach the end of August and the end of summer, what is your game of the year so far? And do you see anything in these next 4 months that could jump your current game of the year? Personally, I don't see a unanimous game of the year, and Herbroxia 2 is the only 2021 game I bought and played. So technically, that's my game of the year. It's been a backlog year for me. Thank you. It's been a bit of a backlog year for me too, although obviously I've been buying and playing games as they've come out. I'll leave my answer for last. Dustin, what is your game of the year so far?
So my game of the year so far, the game I've enjoyed playing the most has been Nier Replicant, but that's kind of, it's a remake situation. So the backup answer is Hitman 3 was the best new
January release
game that I played. So there's a couple that could take it, I think. All eyes on Deathloop and Halo Infinite, of course. I know it's hard to believe, but it could be.
Sure.
That's totally valid.
That's totally valid. Let me ask you this before I move over to Chris. Do you think this year has been bad for games? I actually am hard pressed to think of a worse year. Like, I'd have to go really look and see, but this has been a pretty brutal year. And I think that's just the way it is. That's why I think 2022 is going to be explosive for games. 2021 has just been a year of delays and game. It's just the industry has greatly suffered. I'm sure that there have been great games that have come out that I have not played yet or don't know about. I'm just saying, specifically from a AAA angle, I don't think it's been a very strong year at all.
No, and I think that it's hard to say. I'm looking through like the OpenCritic top games this year, and we've gotten some really awesome games. Resident Evil was awesome. Returnal. Obviously, we have different takes on that, but it's no doubt a good game for as far as production and how it plays and stuff. But now I'm looking, it's like, yeah, it's definitely been on the weaker side, no doubt.
It's meager out there right now, I think. It won't be for very long, though. Chris, what's your favorite game of the year so far?
Man, I'm looking through. There is actually more this year than I thought there was. Resident Evil Village was like a lot of fun. It's like Psychonauts 2 I haven't played yet, but it's apparently really great. Deathloop is on the horizon. Hitman 3 was awesome. Dying Light 2 at the end of the year. Obviously for me, Halo's a big deal. We had Ratchet and Clank, Returnal, like you said. I gotta be real, man. Like, I think so far, I think It Takes Two is probably it.
It's
Like,
really good.
it's just so surprising. And the fact that it's like a new IP and it's as competently designed as it is, and it's not relying on like, some franchise that everybody loves, and it's just this weird kind of like passion project that's just really well made and really fun. And I think of the games so far, granted this last half is going to be interesting of the year, but so far, I think that's the game that I've really the new game that I really enjoyed like the most. If I was being an asshole, I could say Destiny again.
Yeah, I mean,
but
that would be a perfectly valid answer too, I think. But
yeah,
for me, Outriders is easily the best game that I played this year. I mean, easily. And do I anticipate that it'll be beat by something else? Maybe. The games that shine to me right now, Tales of Arise, I'm really looking forward to. Far Cry 6 could be, because I'm a huge Far Cry guy. Deathloop, as Dustin said, could be one. But other than that, I don't anticipate, I don't know, I don't see anything else really coming in hot. Now, Returnal was awesome. I really loved the experience of it. Resident Evil Village was really great. I liked Ratchet and Clank. I really liked the game Cyber Shadow, although I have to go back and beat it. And then there were just a lot of smaller or older games that I played this year. Like, I platinumed that role-playing game RFL. I played that indie roguelike game and platinum Sparklight. I platinumed Wild Arms 3, which took me like 150 hours. And I was messing around with, I want to give a shout out to Scarlet Nexus, which I did beat. I played it for like 35 or 40 hours. It was a good game. Very Japanese, but very good, but a lot. And I liked Trigger Witch, obviously, which I platinumed. Ender Lilies, I platinumed, and I really enjoyed that. But a lot of the stuff was just kind of games that I was dicking around with. I dick around with Puyo Puyo Tetris or something, so I just feel like this has been a strange one. I've also spent an enormous amount of time with just older games that I didn't get any trophies for. Like, I played Rainbow Moon for probably 50 hours and didn't get any trophies because I had them all already. So situations like that. So there's just a lot of different things to consider. But I'm excited about this back half of the year, or this back quarter of the year, because I feel like there could be a few nice shiny objects in there for me, especially Tales.
Yeah, I feel like it's starting to pick up now.
Indeed.
Like, it's going to be interesting.
Indeed, I'm excited. Once we get through the live show, we all get back and can kind of establish ourselves and settle in for the fall. And I think that's when, we'll have lots of things to play. But that's all we have for this episode of Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. Dustin, do you have any closing comments?
Any closing comments? No, stay well. This is the time people are asking me, like, should I play this? Should I play that? And my answer is almost always like, yes. Someone asked me about Persona. I'm like, if you don't play it now, you probably won't play it for at least a year, because this is where things are really starting to get going. So should be cool. Lots to talk about.
Chris, talk to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the last time I'll be signing out from here.
From your CIA black site.
Yeah, from my little my CIA black site. Yeah, so the second this is done, I'm unplugging everything and putting it all in a box and hoping it doesn't shatter when it arrives. Fingers crossed on that one. But
I am very confident that it will, and I'm wishing you the very best in your moving. I'll see you soon. Obviously, we'll all see each other on here for one more episode before we see each other again in person. But boys, thank you for your time today. Be well. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of Sacred Symbols and all things Last Stand. Remember, you can support us again, Patreon, Last Stand Media. Buy merch, laststandmedia.shop. Subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on podcast services, etc., and so on. Thanks again. We love you. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.